Chapter 686, Origin of Calamity. From afar came a shout, "What are you men doing? All of you, stop!" The voice resounded like thunder itself. That was precisely the reinforcements that Yu Man Lu had summoned reaching the scene. The sound of fluttering robes sounded incessantly as experts from the Yu family appeared in all directions. In a split second, the situation was reversed, removing all the rebelling people. Only the second prince was left with bloodshot eyes, shouting about beating and killing people. Everyone had a cloud of fog in their heads. The rebels only had a strength of 3,000-4,000, but with just this paltry amount of strength, they wanted to attack the imperial palace, wishing for the chance to rule the dynasty. Moreover, the second prince himself should have the ability to summon over 20,000 people, so why did he only bring out this amount of strength? Wasn't this absurd? Yu Man Lu slowly walked up, his face devoid of joy or anger. He walked up towards his second son, before suddenly striking out with a vicious backhanded slap on his face. "Pa!" The second prince immediately spouted out a mouthful of blood, and when he opened his mouth, dents of pearly white teeth fell out in orderly fashion. He swayed and fell unconscious without even a sound. "Take them away. Put him into the death prison, and explicitly state that no one is to visit him. All who disobey will be executed regardless of status." Yu Man Lu's eyes were sharp like swords, cold and indifferent as he spoke. Reporting. Another scout ran over on horseback, both man and horse sweating profusely. However, they were actually dressed in mourning clothes. The moment Yu Man Lu saw this, a bad feeling surfaced in his heart. Reporting a broken bar to the emperor. Third Princea broken bar. Third Princea broken bar. He broken bar. The newcomer glanced at Yu Man Lu, dismounting and trembling as he stuttered, simply unable to speak coherently. "What happened to the third prince?" Yu Man Lu's voice was even, but his robes trembled from the exertion of maintaining his composure. His voice also had a few hints of hoarseness within it. Third Princea broken bar. The guards in his residence actually carried out an armed rebellion somehow, and unable to adapt to the sudden change, Third Prince He broken bar has been assassinated. As he finished speaking, he knocked his head on the floor and burst out bawling. Yu Man Lu opened his mouth but was unable to speak. His body unconsciously took a step back, and suddenly felt that the future in front of him was completely blank. There was nothing left. He had 3 sons, with the eldest Liu Yun having been schemed against, his second son plotting a rebellion today, and his youngest actually being assassinated today as well. From behind him came a putong sound. The empress, who had just woken up from having fainted earlier, fell like a piece of dead wood onto the ground. The pain she felt from losing her child was no less than Yu Man Lu's. Everyone present kept quiet out of fear, not daring to even let out half a bit of sound. After a long while, Yu Man Lu finally regained some semblance of clarity. He staggered forward, but as the experts of the Yu family stepped forward to aid him, he suddenly froze, and with a spitting motion, he puked out a mouth of blood. A broken bar. Yu Man Tian stood by the side in a daze. While he had never liked those 2 nephews of his, seeing them in these circumstances today, he too could not help but feel a sense of heartache. "Let's a broken bar. Return a broken bar." Another lengthy period passed before Yu Man Lu hoarsely gave the command. He woodenly turned around, and slowly walked in front, his posture seemingly a little stooped. The great chaos that took place in Bright Jade City this time could be compared to a legion of bandits infiltrating into a city, wantonly killing and pillaging. The losses were great, to the point they were incalculable. A glorious city had actually turned into a scene of desolation and trauma, unable to return to its past glory. The origin of calamity radiated from the Yu family's residence as the core, radiating a circumference of more than 5 kilometers from the epicenter. Thousands of houses were burned, and the death count numbered in the tens of thousands. At the center where the chaos spread the most, everything had turned into literal ruins. Families cried in pain and suffering. The white flags used to send souls off were all raised one by one, fluttering in the breeze. If one were to look with a bird's eye view, they would think that the land was covered in snow. And up to this point, no one knew how or why this incident took place. Everything was muddled and in a mess, covered with a mysterious veil. While everyone wanted to find a scapegoat to take the blame, There was no one suitable to take the blame. After 3 days, the disturbances finally settled down. Tian, the third master Yu, had been busy rushing around for these 3 days to the point that his feet had almost practically not stayed in the same spot for more than a minute. His booming voice shook the area constantly. The only person who could be said to have benefited from this incident would only be Tian, as he was directly pardoned from his punishment by Lu, and instructed to clean up this mess. After this entire fiasco, those who Lu could trust were just too few. A total of 60% of the officials belonging to the Yu family had actually died in this mysterious calamity. As for Lu, he had to lie on the bed after this entire incident. However much he was unwilling to utilize Tian, he no longer had a choice. In the entire city, the only person remaining from the Yu family who still possessed authority was Lu in a broken bar. Within Lu's bedchambers, Lu had on a strip of white cloth wrapped around his head, as though he was an invalid, lying propped up on his bed with a haggard expression. "Your Majesty, the problem lies in Rainbow Jade Lake." An emaciated old man was kneeling in front of Lu as he spoke. This official had begun to control and inspect the water sources after learning of this matter, and discovered that a large amount of a hallucinatory drug was mixed within the waters of Rainbow Jade Lake. Rainbow Jade Lake, hallucinatory drug. Have you determined the compounds, and what countermeasures to take? Lu mumbled to himself as he frowned. Because of its clarity, the waters in the lake became the main source of water for the Yu family and the surrounding hundreds of people in their area. Furthermore, because of the existence of a spring at the bottom of the lake, the water was sweet and tasty. It's not really correct to describe it as a hallucinogen actually. The old man paused for a while before continuing. The composition of this medicine is extremely weird, as it will give rise to strange fantasies to those who consume it, making them feel violent and vicious. In addition, their courage would also be magnified 100-fold, and it is not wrong to say that they would have balls of steel. Raising his head, he glanced at Lu once before speaking again. For all who consume this medicine, they would end up being unable to control their heart's desires, and would attempt to fulfill them at all costs, ignoring any and all consequences. This official here broken bar tested the effects on 5 individuals. The first had nowhere to vent his desires and ended up killing his wife. The second ran straight to the brothel and ended up raping one of the staff there. The third ran into his office and beheaded his superior, and the last 2 actually went to try and rob a bank in broad daylight. Broken bar. How could such a frightening drug exist in this world? Lu sucked in a breath of cold air. Do you have any idea to collect and replicate it? A difficult expression appeared on the old man's face as he replying to the emperor. This drug is too unique and has never been seen before. Furthermore, a broken bar Rainbow Jade Lake would turn back into its original state in at most a day later, with all traces of the drug completely vanishing. At the same time, all the affected people would also regain clarity, just like a dream. As such, this might tear a broken bar. Since that's the case, based on your opinion, was this matter instigated? Lu changed the topic. Before this incident, this official here had never heard of such a weird drug, and also a broken bar. Even in the historical records, there have been no sightings of such an incident. As such, this official thinks a broken bar. The old man swallowed with difficulty. This should be considered a natural disaster, as the scale is beyond the ability of man. Is that so? Broken bar. You may leave. Lu quietly lay back on his bed and closed his eyes. The old man bowed deeply before retreating. Natural disaster? How could this be a natural disaster? Beyond the ability of man? Lu mumbled before a fierce look crossed his face as he hollered, "Men!" 2 men in black robes appeared soundlessly, causing Lu to feel a wave of sadness. As it turned out, when he had shouted, he had subconsciously expected the soul and spirit brothers to appear. However, he recalled that the brothers had already been laid to eternal rest back in Skybearing, and could no longer appear in front of him. A broken bar. Both of you, find a chance to infiltrate the depths of Rainbow Jade Lake. Search for any unusual occurrences and report. Yes. After the duo left, Lu furrowed his brow as he thought about it. He opened his mouth, ready to shout, but then closed it as he suddenly felt a wave of loneliness rush into him. To think that when he had met with such a huge problem, he would actually not have a single person to discuss this matter with. A broken bar. Should this matter be classified as a natural disaster, or a man-made calamity? Yu Man Lu's senses told him that this matter should have some link to Ling Tian. However, Ling Tian right now was busy with the establishment of his empire and was also involved in deploying his troops to conquer other countries. How would he have the time to do such a thing? Besides, if this matter was really caused by Ling Tian, how could he fail to capitalize on such a good opportunity? This was totally unlike his style. If Ling Tian really had this sort of weird toy, why, how would he even have any opponents left in this world? He just needed to place this drug in the water source of his enemies before they fought. How could anyone put up a resistance against this? During these few days, Yu Man Lu had been acting ill, attempting to force the hand of the orchestrator of this incident out in the open. However, there had actually been no hidden undercurrents at all. This made Yu Man Lu, who originally had a firm hypothesis, to start to waver in his conjectures. In truth, this matter was just as Yu Man Lu had guessed, that this matter originated from Ling Tian's hand. However, the unforeseen event that arose from this was something that even Ling Tian himself did not expect. During one of his medicine refining sessions, Ling Tian had inadvertently came across a unique kind of herb, which he named as black plaster grass. The effect of this herb was similar to the poppy on earth, the only difference being that its effect was much more tyrannical, making it a heavenly herb for synthesizing hallucinogens. He commanded the Crystal Pavilion that time to plant and collect these herbs in large quantities using his private channels. The last time he paid a visit to Bright Jade City, the Crystal Pavilion informed him that they had amassed an entire warehouse full of the herb. Ling Tian conveniently used a few days' time to mix it with the heavenly adhering grass as well as the water-soluble pellet, grinding the compound into a fine powder. He actually had the intention to use it immediately but felt in the end that this compound was going against the harmony of the heavens and earth itself, and thus stayed his hand. Before he left, Ling Tian had lugged 3 huge bags of the particular powder, wrapping them securely within oiled cloths, and submerged them within the Rainbow Jade Lake. He had buried them within the mouth of the spring, weighing them down with boulders. This was in preparation as a last resort. If he still was unable to achieve victory at the final moment, then he would detonate this time bomb he set. However, the actions of Yu Man Lu during the opening ceremony of the Divine Prefecture Empire had thoroughly touched on Ling Tian's nerves. As such, he commanded through a messenger falcon to inform the Crystal Pavilion residing within Bright Jade City to rip apart the oiled clothes, allowing the drug to scatter in the mouth of the spring. The original efficacy of the herb would be lost when it came into contact with water, but with the addition of the heaven-adhering grass and water-soluble pellets, it became a weird drug where its medicinal efficacy was best displayed in water. What comes around, goes around. If Yu Man Lu had not been so sinister, Ling Tian would never have resorted to such measures this time around. Chapter 687, Arriving at the southeast. As the medicinal powder was rapidly dispersed all over the lake, the entire Bright Jade City was thrown into a chaos like what Ling Tian had expected. However, even the mastermind behind the whole matter had underestimated the frightening might of the medicinal powder. Anyone with inner chi would be able to easily suppress the medicinal powder and purge it within a single day. Thus, Ling Tian felt that the medicinal powder would only be able to make the Yu family lose some face and create a bit of trouble for them. He never imagined that this medicinal powder would almost destroy the entire empire. In the world today, how many individuals were capable of producing inner chi? When Ling Tian was testing the medicinal powder, he was able to suppress it easily without much effort and thus felt that the power of the medicinal effect of the powder wasn't excessive. However, even with Ling Tian's inner strength back then, how many would be a match for him? Thus, he unknowingly created this disaster for the Yu family. This was something that Ling Tian had never expected, and it was a mere coincidence. It was a pity that he no longer had any of this medicinal powder. If not, there wouldn't be anyone in the world capable of stopping him. What good weather today! The scenery of the southeast was like a painting. The drooping willows spread for 3,000 miles, 90,000 fine blue silks. Witnessing the movement of the entire world, our southeast Zhao family is number one. Ling Tian rode on his horse as he muttered the Zhao family's poem under his breath, with the glistening words of a green ripple immortal park before him. Ling Tian could not help but be moved. If the Zhao family truly kept to their ancestral teachings and never participated in the war for hegemony, Ling Tian would probably be helpless against them even after uniting the entire world. With a natural barrier at the entrance to the southeast and an endless supply of resources to sustain themselves, they would never fall. Even if Ling Tian wasn't willing, he could only allow the existence of the Zhao family. In the southeast, the Zhao family had extremely deep roots with an extremely good reputation among the commoners. That's right, while Ling Tian was able to make use of explosives to take down the pass, he had to have a reason to start a battle after all. If he tried to start a battle without a proper reason, war would definitely break out and the final outcome would be the loss of countless lives. Even if the history books were written by the victor, he would definitely be reduced to a miserable state where the hearts of the commoners weren't with him. However, when facing the changing times, the Zhao family, which held on to immeasurable wealth and millions of soldiers, could not withstand the temptation of ruling over the entire world. Thus, they worked together with above heavens and hoped to rule over the entire world. Who would have thought that they would have suffered a miserable defeat before they could even walk out from the southeast? With a few thousand kilograms of explosives, Ling Tian caused the mountain to collapse and reversed the flow of the rivers. He destroyed the natural barrier to the southeast and destroyed the invading Zhao family warriors, ending the dream of the Zhao family. Was it fate? As Zhao Fengyang looked at the scenery like a painting before him, he felt his heart in turmoil. At the endless drooping willows green throughout spring, the Zhao family will be wealthy for 1,000 years. These words were passed down by their ancestors, and only then did Zhao Fengyang know that the wealth of the Zhao family didn't lie in the endless willows but in the human heart. It lay in ambitions. Ever since the rising of the Zhao family, the Zhao family had ruled over the entire southeast for a full 1,000 years. Not a single year more or less. It was truly a stunning coincidence. Could it be that it was their destiny? After going through the largest ups and downs of human life, Zhao Fengyang, who had returned back home again, could not help but remember these words, and tears filled his face. They had let down their ancestors. How would he be able to face his ancestors in the underworld today, as well as in the future? While the Zhao family would still be around, the Zhao family's existence would only be because of a single daughter. It would be impossible for them to regain their days of glory, and they would no longer be the rulers of the southeast. With Ling Tian's face being concealed under a large hood, he entered the Green Ripple Immortal Park together with the Zhao family's troops. At this moment, the sun was setting, and under the light of the setting sun, the entire Green Ripple Immortal Park was covered in a layer of red. While the scene was a beautiful one, it was also extremely desolate. The endless storm would begin to brew from this moment on. Sect Master has ordered for Junior Sister Yuhan to make a trip to the concealing dragon abode without any delays. A green-robed young man appeared in front of them with a silver token in his hand. His eyes were fixed on Zhao Yuhan, and he treated Zhao Fengyang, who held great authority in the Zhao family, like care. Zhao Fengyang sneered in his heart. Will there still be an above heavens after today? I shall just let you remain arrogant for a while more. Zhao Yuhan had a tinge of displeasure on her face and was obviously dissatisfied with his rude actions. Yes, this disciple obeys the sect master's orders. Junior Sister Yuhan, let us take our leave. The green-robed man was 20 or so years old and had a suave appearance. However, the way his eyes spun around gave a person an extremely annoying vibe. Zhao Yuhan's face turned cold as she thought to herself, with this fellow being so rude, I wonder if that stone-faced fellow will be angry. Will he draw his sword? Thinking about this, her face turned red as she snuck a glance to her side. She then suddenly snapped out of her thoughts. Why am I caring about his emotions? Could it be that he a broken bar? Along the way, Ling Tian followed closely behind Zhao Yuhan like a block of ice. The two of them were like the North and South Pole, emanating a chilly intent for the entire journey, and anyone who approached them would feel a bone-piercing cold. Even Li Zhu, who had cultivated the divine ice formula, would feel a shiver running down her spine. However, these two did not pay any attention to that and had even grown comfortable with each other's presence throughout the journey. After arriving at the Zhao family, Zhao Yuhan, who was already used to Ling Tian's presence, suddenly couldn't see his figure. Right at this moment, a buzzing sound sounded in her ears. "Don't look around, I will follow you." Zhao Yuhan had almost let out a gasp of surprise, converting his voice into a line. Voice transmission. I really couldn't tell that this stone-faced fellow's martial arts were at such a level. Only someone who was at the Xianjian level would be able to use such a skill. At the same time, she was elated in her heart. If his martial arts were at such a level, even if they failed, escaping definitely wouldn't be a problem. Just when she was thinking about that, the voice sounded in her ears again. "The way this fellow stares at you is truly annoying. He will definitely be the first to die later." Zhao Yuhan could not help but roll her eyes. This stone-faced fellow really doesn't know how the word "a death" is written. You can laugh if you can even protect your life. You are actually thinking of killing others. You truly do not even know your own strength. It seems like you are truly too fond of bragging. Do you really think that you are the first pavilion head? She no longer heard anything by her ears. Zhao Yuhan looked at Zhao Fengyang, and Zhao Fengyang chuckled. "Yuhan, since Senior Meng has asked for you, you should hurry and make your way over. As a junior, how can you let your senior wait?" Zhao Yuhan acknowledged his words and jumped off her horse. That green-robed man let out a strange laugh and perfunctorily cupped his fists. "Farewell, Second Master." Before waiting for Zhao Fengyang's reply, he left with Yuhan. Ling Tian, who was hiding under the hood, also had a look of dissatisfaction on her face as she said softly, "From the actions of this young disciple, the difference between beyond heavens and above heavens is truly obvious. They can't even be mentioned in the same breath. It is truly the time for such a sect to meet its demise. What rights do they have to be ranked together with beyond heavens as one of the three hidden sects?" Li Zhu nodded in agreement. "A frog in the well who does not know the size of the ocean. They truly deserve death for their arrogance." Ling Tian laughed. "Since that's the case, wipe them out completely. Pass down my orders. Not a single one shall be allowed to leave alive." Ling Tian waved her sleeves and a black line shot out from her sleeves. An eagle's cry could then be heard and an eagle shot to the air. After making a round in the air, the eagle disappeared into the pavilion. "Justice has yet to arrive. Should we wait for him?" Li Zhu frowned and said softly, "Above heavens has 3,000 death troops and hundreds of disciples. If we face them head-on, it would be hard to avoid death and injuries." Ling Tian smiled and replied, "He has already arrived." He then looked towards an ancient willow tree in the distance and smiled profoundly. "HMPH, Ling Tian, you breath. You actually dare to order this seat around. You are truly bold." A cold snort could be heard from the willow tree, and before Ling Tian could reply, a gray figure shot forward from the willow tree and disappeared without a trace. The direction that he left was towards Zhao Yuhan. Following the departure of the gray figure, the sun set and darkness descended. Ling Tian smiled and muttered to himself, "It would be a waste for me to not use a free fighter like you, Brother Justice. I am not willing to waste resources." Turning around, he looked at Zhao Fengyang and said warmly, "Second Master, now that things have developed to such a state, there isn't any turning back. Try to gather the members of your family towards your position and give a strict order for your family members to not participate in the battle later. That way, your family may be able to preserve some strength." Zhao Fengyang was speechless. He knew that the attack would be swift and this battle would determine their life and death. Ling Tian did not even wait for the Zhao family to make any arrangements and did not even meet with their Zhao family head before launching their attack. Ling Tian let out a sigh and decided to give an explanation after some thought. "Second Master, while this move of mine is rushed, Ming Fanyuan has already summoned Miss Zhao Yuhan. As soon as he finds out about what happened in Sky Bearing, there will definitely be changes regardless of how he reacts. If we do not take action now, we will definitely miss this chance. I believe our Second Master understands this." Chapter 688, Master of the First Pavilion. Zhao Fengyang naturally knew of this, but he felt that with the current security measures, there should be no reason the news would get leaked out. Even if Meng Fanyun wished to take action after he learned of the plan, in the end, he would still need preparation time. During that period, the Zhao family could then rush out more arrangements to ensure their victory. It was a pity that this scheme required all the old and weak as well as the mothers with young children to take cover. Ling Tian shook his head as he sighed. The disciples inside an aristocratic family ultimately were not people of the martial world. They would always use their own opinion and thinking in evaluating others. Indeed, the information restriction on the Ling family was seamless. However, during the grand ceremony of the Ling family previously, there was no slip-up, which meant that the plan of above heavens in scheming against Skybearing had completely failed. No news was leaked out, but to have the second master Zhao able to return safely after the grand ceremony, what did this mean? If Ling Tian's hypothesis was right, most likely the Zhao family was actually within the palms of the above heavens sect. Once they were to move, the first matter would be to completely kill all of them. If they really planned to wait for the above heavens sect to make a move, most likely, the hegemon that was the Zhao family would no longer exist. A broken bar. The ruthlessness of those in the martial world was not something these greenhouse plants from the aristocratic families could understand or accept. The above heavens sect was definitely aware that when they reached the end of the road, once they confirmed that the Zhao family has betrayed them, if they did not resort to a life or death struggle, would they still be termed as the above heavens sect? The above heavens sect leader, Meng Fanyun, stood with his hands behind his back at the main hall, his head raised as he stared at the portrait of the founding ancestor of the above heavens sect without moving. Behind him, lining in 2 rows along the hall, were dozens of men clad in green robes, all completely still without letting out a single sound. Starting from this morning, Meng Fanyun had felt a mysterious sense of irritation as well as anxiety in his heart. He could not put a finger to this feeling, which left him feeling terrible. It seemed like his chronic disease was about to flare up once again. A broken bar. Forcibly suppressing his anxiousness, he stood calmly, as though prepared for everything possible. However, only he knew that the left hand within his robes had been covered in a layer of cold sweat for some time. Is everyone prepared? Meng Fanyun lowly intoned. Everything has been done according to instructions. The entire household of the Zhao family has a total of 360 people, which have already been concentrated within 3 courtyards. There are a total of 300 death warriors standing guard on the outside, together with our own experts. However, once our plans go awry, this subordinate dares guarantee that these people's heads will roll at the first command. Good, keep it low profile and don't let them find out. After all, this is only conjecture, but if needed a broken bar they might still be of use in the future. Yes. Reporting to Sect Master, Junior Sister Zhao Yuhan has arrived. A youth respectfully spoke at this time. He was precisely the youth that was sent to escort Zhao Yuhan back. Let her in. Meng Fanyun raised his brow slightly at the news but did not turn around, instead commanding in a deep voice. For the 6 of them to die was well within their expectations. It would be odd if they could come back alive after such a commotion was created. Zhao Yuhan's identity as part of the Zhao family definitely acted as a protective talisman for her. And this was one of the reasons why Meng Fanyun had selected her for this trip. Yes. Following this came the sound of scattered footsteps. As Zhao Yuhan walked into the main hall step by step, Meng Fanyun's heart grew even more anxious, the ominous feeling within his heart growing ever stronger. However, he still remained perfectly still, scrutinizing and counting the breaths taken by Zhao Yuhan to curb his inner frustrations. He leisurely replied, "Yuan, your breaths are uneven. Just what exactly happened?" For the operation in Skybearing this time, what was the result? Zhao Yuhan shook and raised her head up. This time, the operation to Skybearing, Elder and the Rista broken bar. Zhao Yuhan followed the instructions of relating the falsified version and narrated it to the rest. A complete wipeout? Meng Fanyun's brows jumped, and he coldly smiled. However, his back still faced her as he said, "Then how did you manage to return?" Even Elder Fanling was unable to avoid death, So how could you have the ability to escape? According to Elder Lang's instructions, I did not participate in the action this time. Furthermore, they mentioned that they did not wish to make things difficult for me. Zhao Yuhan calmly replied, not make things difficult to Broken Bar, that's right, they naturally would not trouble you. Meng Fanyan serenely interjected, his tone passive without any joy or anger. Right now, your family should be at an even closer relationship with the Ling family than before, right? Zhao Yuhan's heart skipped a beat, and she immediately replied, why would sect master say such words? The Ling family snatched my family's mountain pass, killed 10,000 of my family's troops, and even kidnapped my second uncle. This hatred will not allow us to share the same sky. How could there even be a way to coexist? Meng Fanyan slowly turned around at this time, sizing up Zhao Yuhan. I merely talked about your two families being closer in relationships. When did I say that you both have mended your relations? For you to explain in such a panicky tone, what is the meaning behind it? Are you trying to cover up something? Zhao Yuhan was stunned into silence. It was only after a long period of time did she finally sadly mutter, if Grand Teacher does not wish to believe in this disciple's report, then this disciple also has nothing to say. Ever since I received the favor of Grand Teacher, I obtained the opportunity to enter the above heavens sect and cultivate all kinds of profound martial arts. The grace bestowed upon me is as high as the heavens and as deep in the earth, so how could I even have the thoughts of betrayal? The sect and the family are like fish and water, intertwined harmoniously with each other. Disciple here has always been happy about this in her heart, but now that sect master is suspicious of this disciple, in order to prove my innocence, Zhao Yuhan, am willing to commit suicide in front of sect master. As she spoke, her sword was pulled out of the sheath in lightning quick speed, the pointer reversed as it stabbed viciously towards her chest. She was unaware of when Ling Tian's plan would begin, but she knew that the only thing she could do now was to stall for time as much as possible. For every second she could delay, it might mean more of her clansmen being saved. Right now, given the large degree of suspicion Meng Fanyan had towards her, with the space between his eyebrows exuding killing intent, there was a high chance his next words would be to send an order to wipe out the Zhao family. As such, Zhao Yuhan decided to innovate, using retreat as a form of advance, betting her life in this strike. If Meng Fanyan stepped out to stop her, disallowing her from committing suicide, this would go to show that his suspicions were not too heavy, at least not to the point of being non-negotiable. Naturally, this would mean that there was a chance to continue dragging it out. However, if he was unwilling to step in, then by actually committing suicide, including the previous words she spoke, even Meng Fanyan would seriously reconsider his suspicions. Whichever the case, it would result in some extra time bought over. However, for her act of committing suicide, every single fiber of her being was irrevocably committed to it. In front of the souled fox that was Meng Fanyan, if one wished to pretend and attempt to scam him, it was akin to seeking death. Thus, Zhao Yuhan's sword was quick as lightning, carrying with it sounds of air tearing as it stabbed straight at her chest. A sorrowful smile hung on her mouth as she thought, coffin board, this is goodbye. I'll never see you again. I can never compete with you as to whose face is colder. However, if my death can save the entire Zhao family, then it is truly worth it. This is what I should do as a daughter of the Zhao family. It's just that a broken bar I feel it is hard to part with you. These thoughts flashed past her mind like shooting stars and lightning arcs. Her movements were akin to a rabbit jumping up or a falcon swooping down, a feast for the eyes. And at this moment, even Ling Tian, who was hidden outside the sect on a tree, was unable to come to her rescue despite his peerless movement techniques. With the issue of the sword stabbed into her chest, Zhao Yuhan felt a piercing pain, accompanied by a wave of chilling coldness, as though a frozen needle had pierced into her. Is this the feeling of death? Zhao Yuhan mused to herself, before suddenly realizing the strangeness of the situation. Why can I still think clearly, and even have consciousness? She could not help but open her eyes. In front of her, two wizened fingers gently held onto the blade of Zhao Yuhan's sword as though it was effortless. The sword stab powered by Zhao Yuhan's full strength had actually only managed to pierce her own skin, Without going in any further, Meng Fanyun held onto the sword blade with his 2 fingers as he coldly looked at her. After a while, he loosened his fingers, and the sword made out of steel essence actually shattered into pieces. Meng Fanyun finally smiled as he spoke, "You silly lass, always so stubborn. To actually go through on your words right after speaking them, without any hesitation. For these sorts of things, we can always talk it out. Why do you need to use your life to prove anything?" Since he was not certain at this moment if the Zhao family had leaned towards the Ling family, Zhao Yuhan must not die. After all, she was a descendant of the Zhao family, and if the news spread about her returning and dying immediately after, he would have no way to explain the situation. This was the reason why Meng Fanyun took action in the end, and not because he pitied her, nor was it because of the relationship between teacher and disciple. Many thanks for the trust sect master has shown, to save Yuhan's little life. Zhao Yuhan also felt herself breaking out in cold sweat. She also experienced some form of otherworldly experience, that living could actually be so good, that she would have the chance to see him a broken bar. Once again, Meng Fanyun's face broke into a smile, reassuring her with a few words, before dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Gazing at her silhouette leaving, Meng Fanyun suddenly felt as though something was wrong, but could not pinpoint the problem. However, Zhao Yuhan indeed used her full strength in attempting suicide previously, without any pretense. Was he getting too suspicious? Just as he was pondering the matter, he felt a rush of anxiety well up from his heart, causing him to violently gasp for breath. His eyes immediately turned a scarlet red. In the end, it has still come. This chronic illness has been flaring up the last few days, and while I've been trying to suppress it, the after effects get worse each time. To think that it still could not be controlled after all. The heavy panting, bringing with it an aura of violence, as well as the disorderly or image Zhao Yuhan, who had just reached the door to turn her head back. This turn of her head let Zhao Yuhan witness an unbelievable scenario. Under the bright lights of the lanterns, a piece of sky seemed to distort, forming into a shadow. The shadow sped through more than 100 feet in an instant like a specter, appearing in front of Meng Fanyun. This action was quick to the extreme, and had already surpassed the boundaries of what the martial world termed as a movement technique. Even with such a long distance to cross, the lit candles within the main hall never once moved. This person's movements could actually not give rise to any disturbance in the surrounding air. A pitch-black sword, akin to a curse delivered by the devil, seemed to materialize from the illusory realm, appearing directly in front of Meng Fanyun's throat. The tyranny of this sword could be described as mountain-shattering and heaven-splitting, fast to the point that the sword blade actually did not reflect the light from its surroundings. While it was soundless and sightless, its might could shake heaven and earth. Up to this point, the sword and its owner appeared as unmoving as mountains, as profound as the sea. Even for such a life-reaping blow, there was still no killing intent leaked out. Meng Fanyun went berserk. Facing such imminent death, it was as though he had sunk into a nightmare. His mind still remained crystal clear, but his body had long stopped listening to his instructions. Facing such a world-shaking sword, a sense of powerlessness welled up from his heart. It was not merely just being unable to avoid, he also had the feeling that he should not avoid such a sword. By the time he snapped out of his reverie, the sword had already reached his throat. With the threat of death looming before him, he utilized all his strength to twist his body to the side, almost snapping his neck in the process. However, he finally avoided the grisly ending of having the sword pierce through his neck. As the sword shot past his neck with a shua sound, it brought with it a blast of ice-cold air, causing goosebumps to form on his skin. Meng Fanyun toppled onto the floor, before borrowing this force to shoot out towards the door. Escape! The shadow flashed, and an icy cold light shone as the pitch-black sword pursued unceasingly, like a maggot burrowing into the bone. Meng Fanyun performed his movement techniques 7 times consecutively, but could not avoid the sword in the end. With a sickening apuchi, the sword stabbed into his shoulder, its impetus akin to a bolt of lightning. Even though the sword had stabbed in, there was no blood to be seen. Meng Fanyun madly used the force to escape another 70 feet away. In contrast, the man in black robes retrieved his sword, but did not chase. Instead, he kept the sword, although his sense continued to lock onto the retreating Meng Fanyan. He stood there coldly, not speaking a single word. There was only hiding, escaping, but no retaliation. Facing a sword stab of such power, even though he was the sect master of above heavens, he could only avoid the attack. He could not, nor was he prepared to counterattack. At this moment, his wound finally burst out in a spray of blood. His arm sagged down powerlessly. While the sword wound was small, Meng Fanyan's heart was totally cold at this point. It was a sort of feeling as though a hero had been driven to his wits' end. While the sword did not dig deep, it had managed to sever his tendons and ligaments in that instant. From the stab wound, a sharp sword energy was also wreaking havoc in his surroundings, making him feel as though his entire arm was being split apart, no longer his own. How could this be? The sword was initially aimed to his neck, and having swerved to avoid it, he would have thrown the accuracy of the wielder off. So how could the sword still so accurately pierce his tendons? How was this even possible? Only now did the people from the main hall react. A hubbub of noise resounded from within. Meng Fanyan revolved his inner energy, sealing up his own left arm. He then turned to face the black-robed man, hatefully spitting out, "Master of the first pavilion?" In that instant, Meng Fanyan had already identified the person. To possess such movement techniques, sword skills, and arts of assassination, and to even be able to face a sect master of the three great hidden sects, a grand master of martial arts, with such an outcome, other than the first pavilion's master, whose reputation had spread far and wide, nobody else was capable of this. "It is I, sect master of above heavens. You indeed have good eyesight." The person in question coldly smiled. The assassin was indeed Ling Tian. While he was still dressed in customary black robes, his bearing was akin to a drawn sword, exuding the life-reaping killing intent. In his hand, the sword he carried even had a droplet of blood congregating on the sword point before it dripped onto the ground with a faint "pa" sound. At this moment, a ripping sound resounded through the main hall. This was the sonic boom caused by the frightening speed previously reached by the sword. It sounded as though a hurricane had torn through the place. The candles within the entire main hall extinguished simultaneously. In the darkness, the silhouette of that masked man in black seemed to resemble a devil that had just touched down on the mortal world, looking in disdain at everyone else. The dozens of people inside the hall did not dare to move under his gaze. As for Yao Yuhan, who was standing by the doors, she felt her heart jolt, as she stared dumbfounded at the scene. Chapter 689, Killing Intent. Ling Tian followed closely behind Yao Yuhan. Ever since he entered the concealing dragon abode, Ling Tian's divine sense had been locked on Meng Fanyan's body. However, with Meng Fanyan's tyrannical Yan Tian energy, his entire aura was melded together with his surroundings without showing the slightest flaw. Furthermore, his profound inner chi was even above that of Yu Manlu. While Ling Tian knew that Meng Fanyan was inside and his divine sense was already locked on Meng Fanyan's aura was completely as one with the hall, and there wasn't a single opening for him to exploit. Even with Ling Tian's world-class assassination techniques, he wasn't able to find any opportunity to attack. Just when Yao Yuhan was about to walk out of the hall, Meng Fanyan's aura was suddenly in a mess for some reason. Furthermore, he could no longer stabilize his mental state. Ling Tian was overjoyed. Such a chance was truly one in a lifetime. One's appearance could be faked and one's martial arts could be faked, but the aura of a peerless expert could not be faked. Ling Tian did not know exactly what had happened to Meng Fanyan to cause such a disruption to his aura, but Ling Tian wasn't interested in finding out. He only knew that this was the best chance to kill Meng Fanyan. As long as he could kill Meng Fanyan, everything else wasn't important. Ling Tian was an assassin and his mission was to assassinate Meng Fanyan. Regardless of how he did it and under what circumstances, Ling Tian's mission would be completed as long as he killed Meng Fanyan. Thus, Ling Tian couldn't be bothered about the so-called big picture. Killing Meng Fanyun was the biggest help to the big picture. Thus, Ling Tian unleashed his attack without the slightest bit of hesitation. Indeed, his single sword proved effective. If not for Meng Fanyun dodging swiftly, this single sword would have detached his head from his neck. Despite the other party dodging his attack, Ling Tian was still able to deal a severe wound to the other party. If not for Ling Tian's pointers and Ling Tian's bitter practice, how could it be possible for him to make this split-second decision? Zhao Yuhan was shocked with her entire body shaking. It turns out that this stone-faced fellow was actually a broken bar. He was actually a broken bar, the first pavilion head. He was actually the first pavilion head? These a broken bar, how is this possible? A broken bar, just what should I do? The aura in the surroundings was oppressive with killing intent all around. However, Zhao Yuhan, who was outside the hall, was completely dumbfounded. Her face was flushed red as she thought about how she had praised and confessed her love for the first pavilion head in front of him in Ling Tian, a broken bar. It was truly too embarrassing. Zhao Yuhan stomped her feet in anger and pouted. Her heart was full of joy and thousands of thoughts flashed past her head at this moment. Despite the swords flashing before her very eyes, her heart was actually trapped in her maiden's thoughts. Just how should I face him? What kind of an identity should I face him with? How should I talk to him? This darn stone-faced fellow, he is truly too annoying and irritating. Zhao Yuhan covered her face with embarrassment as she thought about her embarrassing actions. The thoughts of a little lady were like a poem, dream and fantasy. But the moment she faced reality, the fear of losing him had also filled her heart. A broken bar. With a few swooshing sounds, 40 to 50 black figures swiftly formed a large circle around Ling Tian. Their weapons were in their hands with a look of wariness in their eyes. Despite being in their above heavens headquarters with dozens of experts in the vicinity, he was able to severely wound the sect master of above heavens, one of the top 5 experts in the world. Is this something that an ordinary individual could do? Such martial arts? He was like a ghost and spirit. No, his martial arts had already exceeded ghosts and spirits. The lives of all humans are in my hands. The winds and rains heed the first pavilion. First pavilion head truly lives up to your reputation. Meng Fanyun let out a chuckle as he supported his injured shoulder. Under such circumstances and being in the headquarters of our above heavens, how would a person capable of injuring me with a single sword be an unknown individual? While you did play some tricks with that sword of yours, the only group capable of performing such an assassination is the first pavilion. In the first pavilion, only the pavilion head would be capable of such a feat. He let out 2 coughs and a look of self-mockery could be seen on his face. If any assassin in the world was capable of this, then the first pavilion wouldn't be called the first pavilion. Ling Tian looked at his sword tip with a sharp gaze and said, "Are you trying to mock me for succeeding with an ambush?" Meng Fanyun snorted coldly and rolled his eyes. "First pavilion head, aren't you looking down on me a little too much? Victory is victory. Defeat is defeat. Not having the ability to defend against an ambush is my own inability. Since I have lost and will be killed, what face do I have to blame others?" He suddenly let out a long sigh. "Back then, I cultivated the divine blazing sun formula since I was young and improved rapidly. However, I was too hasty and achieved the 3rd level before 15 years of age. Before my foundation of the 3rd level is stable, I consume the blazing sun pill. In the end, my body wasn't fully developed and my vital yang energy wasn't stable. I suffered a backlash from the pure yang fire and almost lost my life. I only managed to keep my life because of my master and martial uncles. Everyone did not know the reason for his words and listened silently. But from that day on, my meridians were harmed. With the improvement of my divine blazing sun formula, the injuries to my meridians also grew more and more severe. In the past few years, my divine blazing sun formula was finally fully completed, but the burning of my meridians could no longer be controlled. My cultivation formula cultivates the vital yang energy and I suffered from a fire injury. If I want to recover, I only need to disperse my cultivation and my life will be saved. But if I did that, I would become a complete cripple. As a disciple from above heavens, It would be a fate worse than death if I lose my martial arts. Master had once said that I would suffer a huge loss because of my meridians and may even lose my life. Meng Fanyan burst out into laughter and glared at Ling Tian. It seems like my master was right indeed. Ling Tian had a slight smile on his face and was completely unbothered by the countless weapons gleaming around him. He looked at Meng Fanyan with a sneer. This is also a reason. You think that this is the reason for your loss. While it seems like you have accepted reality on the surface, you have not accepted it in your heart. With this mental state of yours, you will never be able to reach the peak of martial arts in this life of yours. Ling Tian's words were like knives. You aren't worthy with your mental state. A trace of anger flashed past Meng Fanyan's face and he snorted. First Pavilion Head. We are both in different camps and there isn't a need to talk about this. However, this old man is very interested in who sent you. Can you tell me? Ling Tian laughed coldly. Meng Fanyan, you do not need to waste your effort to stall for time. You should know that your death is certain today. It isn't just you, there are many who are going to die today. You will not have to walk the Yellow Springs Road alone. From the beginning, Meng Fanyan knew that Ling Tian's aura had been locked onto him. As long as he made the slightest move, he would definitely be met with an all-out attack from Ling Tian. Thus, he did not make a single move and began talking. He wanted to diminish Ling Tian's killing intent and make use of the chance to circulate his inner qi. When he was confident that he could break free from Ling Tian's aura lock, he would make his move. At the very least, he would have to first purge the sharp sword qi from his shoulder. However, even if he was stalling for time, wasn't Ling Tian doing so as well? If it was any other mission, Ling Tian wouldn't even bother saying a single word and execute his mission before escaping. Currently, Ling Tian couldn't do that. He had to wait for Ling Tian and justice to arrive. Meng Fanyan, who was severely injured, was already within his grasp. Under the lock-on of his aura, even if Meng Fanyan tried to escape, he would definitely die under a single sword. Ling Tian had absolute confidence. Thus, Ling Tian wasn't anxious. There was another reason. While Ling Tian's sword strike seemed simple, it was imbued with his entire cultivation, especially when he had to change his target after his opponent avoided his attack. While his sword strike was successful, it also exhausted a great deal of inner qi and mental strength. The longer time dragged on, the more he could recover. At that time, he would be more confident in both escaping and killing his enemy. His gaze swept past the crowd surrounding him. Even with Ling Tian's calm and stability, he could not help but be startled. The number of experts in the crowd was truly out of Ling Tian's expectations, especially the three white-haired elders in the crowd. While they seemed old and past their prime, their eyes were gleaming with strength and their auras were powerful. While they weren't a match for Meng Fanyan, they weren't too far away either. Their inner strength alone was already at the level of Shui Wubo and Yuman Lu. These must be the three most mysterious elders in Above Heavens. To think that Above Heavens would have three such experts. They truly live up to the name of being a hidden sect at the same level of Beyond Heavens. If Ling Tian attacked at this moment, he was 100% sure that he would be able to kill Meng Fanyan. However, he wasn't confident that he would be able to deal with the encirclement of the other experts. In fact, there wasn't the slightest chance for him to escape. Those in the hall could naturally understand this as well, and thus none of them dared to make a move, afraid that a rash action of theirs may result in the life of their sect master being lost. Both of them were acting warily. No, perhaps only Above Heavens was acting warily. Ling Tian didn't attack because the time wasn't right. To Ling Tian, nothing was more important than the mission that Ling Tian had given to him, including his own life. Killing Meng Fanyan was his mission. Ling Tian had never considered what would happen after killing Meng Fanyan. He would kill first before saying anything else. In the hall, there was an eerie silence. The situation was extremely tense. If Meng Fanyan could purge the sword qi in his shoulder before Ling Tian took action, he would be able to regain the majority of his strength and have the ability to deal with Ling Tian's sure kill strike. At that time, it would be too late for Ling Tian to take action. Stalling for time was extremely beneficial to him. It was a pity that Meng Fanyan didn't know that stalling for time would only bring them into grave danger. As he stalled for time, How can Ling Tian not understand such a simple logic? However, Ling Tian needed time to wait for Ling Tian and Justice to arrive. As long as they arrived, so what if Meng Fanyun could recover? Chapter 690, Peerless Assassin. It was only then that Yanzu understood that Ling Tian was only joking with her when he asked her to aid Ling Tian. It was a complete joke from the beginning to the end. With Yanzu's cultivation, she probably didn't even have the ability to go anywhere near the battle. Seeing Ling Tian stand in the middle of the hall like a celestial with his sword suppressing the dozens of above heavens experts around him without a single person daring to make a move, Yanzu had a sudden sense of pride in her heart. This is the man who she had eyes for. In the world today, how many of such men would there be? But after feeling a sense of pride, she had endless fear in her heart. Regardless of how spectacular Ling Tian's martial arts were, he was only a single person. While he seemed to be suppressing the experts of above heavens at the moment he killed Meng Fanyun, there wouldn't be the slightest bit of chance for him to escape. If Ling Tian didn't kill Meng Fanyun and attempted to make a full retreat, the countless above heavens experts may be able to keep him from leaving. However, Ling Tian couldn't leave. Even if he wanted to leave, he had to first kill Meng Fanyun before leaving. Yanzu was extremely flustered in her heart. Just what should she do? Just how could she save this fellow after he completed his assassination? Meng Fanyun looked at Ling Tian with his eyes gleaming and suddenly said, "Sir Pavilion Head, at this moment, both of us are extremely clear that none of us dares to make a move. If my experts make a move first, I will definitely be the first to take a step onto the Yellow Springs Road, and this is something that my above heavens cannot accept. If Sir makes a move first, even if I die, you will definitely not be able to leave alive." Under the combined attack of 50 to 60 Yantian experts, even if you are Justice, so what? He then said with a smile, "The way I see it, why don't we each take a step back and make friends with each other?" Meng Fanyun had misjudged the situation and thought that Ling Tian didn't attack because he was afraid of being trapped in an encirclement. Thus, this above heavens sect master attempted to negotiate with Ling Tian. Ling Tian seemed to be in deep thought, pondering over what Meng Fanyun had said. Meng Fanyun was elated and continued, "Pavilion Head roams unhindered in the world and there isn't a single person who doesn't admire your name. I have already been severely injured by Pavilion Head, and even if Pavilion Head leaves now, it wouldn't leave a stain on Pavilion Head's majestic name. Pavilion Head is an intelligent man and should naturally know how to make your choice." Two cold beams shot out from Ling Tian's eyes and he said coldly, "There are something that you are right about. If your men make a move first, you will die. If I make a move first, you will die. Regardless of which party makes a move first, you will definitely be the first to die." Meng Fanyun snorted. "However, the second to die will definitely be you." A tinge of laughter could be seen in Ling Tian's eyes. Meng Fanyun thought that he had persuaded Ling Tian and heaved a sigh of relief, only to hear Ling Tian say, "Not necessarily." Meng Fanyun flew into a rage and said, "Not to mention the first Pavilion Head, even if the #1 expert in the world, Justice, was standing in your place, he would definitely be dead in the face of the full strength of my above heavens." "Oh, what big words!" "Is that really the truth?" Ling Tian said coldly. At the same time, another voice drifted in from outside the hall, "Sect Master Meng's words are truly bold. This seat is extremely interested to find out what kind of strength is capable of killing this seat." Meng Fanyun's face changed. "Why would he be here?" "Martial Order Medallion Owner Justice. He is here." "The heavens want my death." Meng Fanyun never imagined that his luck would be so terribly bad. In order to persuade the #1 assassin in front of him, he had mentioned the #1 expert in the world as an example. It was only normal for the #1 expert in the world to be superior to the #1 assassin. However, Who would have thought that he would have summoned the #1 expert in the world with those words of his? I am truly too unlucky. Meng Fanyan almost had the urge to give himself a few tight slaps for spouting such nonsense. However, it was already too late for Meng Fanyan to regret. At this moment, Ling Tian, who had heard this voice, made his move. Like a bolt of lightning, his target was Meng Fanyan. Ling Tian raised his sword and charged forward, dashing through the crowd like a ghostly figure. A series of enraged roars sounded immediately and countless blade lights were slashed down towards Ling Tian. Countless palm strikes were sent out mercilessly towards the ghostly figure. The entire hall was thrown into chaos. Ling Tian's face remained calm and was completely indifferent towards the incoming attacks. In his eyes, he could only see a single person, Meng Fanyan. Meng Fanyan let out a loud cry and tossed out the sword in his right hand. At the same time, he sent out 79 palm strikes as his figure retreated backward rapidly. Meng Fanyan retreated 100 feet with a flash and his back was already up against the wall of the hall. He could not retreat any further. Despite the entire hall being filled with the blade lights of the above heavens experts, such an extravagant attack and luxurious lineup did not give Meng Fanyan the slightest bit of security. His eyes suddenly jerked with his eyeballs spinning around in all directions. His throat let out a few choking sounds as he tried his best to take in fresh air. However, it was useless. On his chest at the position of his heart, a little red dot could be seen with blood oozing out of it. He had already suffered from a sword strike, a strike capable of taking his life, a strike sending him to the Yellow Springs. Ling Tian's figure was like a fish in water as he weaved through the crowd. However, he could feel a burning sensation on his legs and he had already suffered an injury. The wind from Meng Fanyan's palm strikes blew fiercely before him and Meng Fanyan's palm strike had arrived. Tilting his body to the side, Ling Tian nimbly avoided the palm strike and his sword stabbed out at lightning speed before it was retracted equally quickly. Under the mutual lock-on of their auras, regardless of where Meng Fanyan escaped to, Ling Tian would be able to find him even with his eyes shut. After Ling Tian successfully assassinated Meng Fanyan, he made use of his nimble and mystical movement techniques to avoid the desperate final attack from his opponent. However, it was a pity that he couldn't avoid them all and suffered 2 palm strikes to his left shoulder. He then halted his footsteps abruptly and a brilliant ball of sword light was formed with a wave of his sword. Before the experts in the hall could react, the ball of light exploded into sword rays shooting out in all directions and a series of wails could be heard. Ling Tian's mystical movement techniques appeared again. The next instant, Ling Tian's figure was already back to his original position, the middle of the hall. Ling Tian's clothes were tattered all over and sword cuts covered his body. With this single advance and retreat, there were more than 10 people who collapsed on the floor. However, Ling Tian could not avoid the numerous blades and dozens of sword cuts covered his body. The strangest thing was the fact that apart from the wounds on his legs that were bleeding, the other wounds on the upper half of his body weren't bleeding in the slightest. In the gaps where his black robes were tattered, a glowing gold light could be seen. A trace of gratitude could be seen in Ling Tian's eyes. Protective vest. Ling Tian had made use of the Flood Dragon's hard skin to craft a dozen or so protective vests and Ling Tian had received one. Initially, Ling Tian insisted on rejecting the protective vest, thinking that the vest would be completely useless and would even affect his mobility and flexibility. In the end, Ling Tian flew into a rage and gave a strict order to force Ling Tian to put on the vest. Who would have thought that the vest would save his life today? Protective vest. This B Street Road has a protective vest. A white-haired elder was angered to the point he almost vomited blood. He initially thought that the other party would have been reduced to mush under their flurry of blades but never expected him to have such a treasure. No wonder this fellow would ensure that there were no other openings to any part of his body apart from his chest and back. It turns out that he had nothing to be afraid of. However, just what kind of material was the protective vest made of? It was actually able to receive the attacks of dozens of Xiantian experts without being damaged. With just his martial arts alone, the first pavilion head could look down on the world proudly. Together with this protective vest, a broken bar. Looking at the numerous sword cuts all over Ling Tian's body, Zhao Yuhan felt as though a large hammer hammered down on her chest. She almost blacked out and she felt her innards burning on fire. "He is injured. He is injured." A broken bar. Her heart was filled with those words and she felt an explosion going off in her head. She could not consider anything else and she almost died from the heartache. Only until the white-haired elder let out a roar did Zhao Yuhan snap out from her grief, looking at Ling Tian standing in the middle of the hall unharmed. Zhao Yuhan was overjoyed and had the urge to dive into Ling Tian's embrace and burst out crying. However, she couldn't. If she really pounced forward into his embrace, she would only become his burden and may even be the accomplice to kill him. Ling Tian remained silent and his sword stabbed out again. Only at this moment did Meng Fanyun's body, which was leaning against the wall, slide down onto the ground. His eyes were wide open and disbelief and regret could be seen in his eyes. "Sect Master has passed away. Sect Master has passed away." A loud roar could be heard in the eyes of the experts in the hall. All turned red as they pounced forward at Ling Tian. "Take revenge for Sect Master," someone cried out at the top of his lungs. Everyone charged forward as though they had gone mad. Ling Tian immediately felt the pressure increasing many times and he could no longer deal with the never-ending stream of attacks. Clanging sounds could be heard whenever his enemy's blades came into contact with his protective vest. While they weren't able to destroy his vest, the powerful force from their Xiantian inner chi was enough to make Ling Tian miserable. Even if he didn't seem injured on the surface, he would definitely have some internal injuries. With the burning pain on his left shoulder, he almost could not lift up his left hand anymore. The two palm strikes from Meng Fanyun weren't so easily taken. While he had his protective vest and inner chi to protect his body, the desperate strike of this peerless expert had still caused great injury. Brandishing his sword a few times, another above heaven's expert lay on the floor dead. At the same time, Ling Tian received another blow to his left shoulder because of its stiffness. His black mask had already disappeared and Ling Tian's face was filled with calmness. Not a single emotion could be seen on his face and killing intent exploded forth from his entire body. He reaped the lives of those around him with every sword strike but also began suffering from injuries one after another. Ever since he entered the hall, Ling Tian had not looked at Zhao Yuhan again. He was afraid. While Ling Tian wasn't afraid of death, he was afraid that his heart might falter if he saw that beautiful appearance and his resolution would waver. Shoo! His right leg suffered another sword strike. Ling Tian's body slanted to the right and almost collapsed on the ground as his sword stabbed out mercilessly at the one who injured him. Ling Tian was already in a miserable situation. Chapter 691, Dissolved Sect. Zhao Yuhan looked at the black figure darting around the hall with tears all over her face and hopelessness in her heart. The sword in her hand was already pointed towards her abdomen. If Ling Tian died, Zhao Yuhan would stab down without the slightest hesitation. "I shall not live alone if the gentleman dies." Zhao Yuhan bit down on her lips as she tightly gripped her sword. A loud roar like a dragon sounded and a green shadow shot into the hall. With a few crashing sounds, the experts surrounding Ling Tian were all sent flying like balls with blood spraying out from their mouths. Justice had charged in with a face full of depression and anger in his heart. After that single sentence of his, Justice did not say anything else. He had been watching from the outside and was waiting for Ling Tian to be unable to hold off his opponents. Justice wanted to see if Ling Tian would plead to him for help. Justice wanted to see if the expressionless face of Ling Tian would change or show any fear at the face of death. However, Justice was disappointed. Ling Tian did not even let out a single sound. While he knew that a powerful aide was by his side and that Justice could easily jump into the battle and defuse his situation, Ling Tian did not plead for help. Ling Tian's face remained calm and expressionless. The greater the danger he faced, the calmer he was. Not to mention seeing anxiousness in Ling Tian's eyes. Justice could not see anything but killing intent. Even if he were to be dismembered into countless pieces, Ling Tian would be able to maintain his expression. How could Justice not be depressed? However, Justice didn't know that it wasn't that Ling Tian would never plead for help. However, Ling Tian would only plead to a single person for help in this life of his. That person was Ling Tian. Ling Tian's life belonged to Ling Tian, and it wouldn't matter if he pleaded to Ling Tian for help. In front of Ling Tian, Ling Tian could shed away all of his different faces, be it happiness, anger, grief or fear. But apart from when he was with Ling Tian, Ling Tian would be the proudest person in the world. Even if he was the #1 expert in the world who Ling Tian respected, in Ling Tian's heart, Justice didn't deserve him to plead for his help. Was it because Justice didn't have the right? Not really. It was because Ling Tian would never plead to an outsider for help. He was a proud person. He had a proud heart. Ling Tian. He was superior to everyone in the world apart from Ling Tian. He was a sword. The sound of fists clashing could be heard, and Justice was like a tiger in a herd of sheep displaying his might. In just a short moment, more than 10 experts had died under his fists. He is Justice from beyond heavens. Someone cried out with fear. When facing the first pavilion head, the #1 assassin in the world, Ling Tian, those from above heavens would still have the heart to place their life on the line. But when they faced the martial order medallion owner, the #1 expert in the world, Justice, any thoughts of fighting back had been destroyed. Ling Tian's peerless assassination technique truly separated life from death. Sect Master of Above Heavens, Meng Fanyan, dead. Ling Tian could be proud of this attack of his. This attack was sufficient to shock the world and turn the tides around. However, this attack of his had also incited the ferocious counterattack of the Above Heavens experts. The death of Meng Fanyan had given these Above Heavens experts who viewed Meng Fanyan as a deity a huge blow. While Ling Tian was able to take Meng Fanyan's life with a single sword, he was also exhausted and injured. Together with Meng Fanyan's desperate strike before his death, Ling Tian had fallen into a bitter battle. This would probably be the time of his death. However, Justice had appeared at this moment, and the Above Heavens experts who were launching a frenzied attack for their revenge were jolted awake. This was the effect of his reputation. They could remain fearless in the face of the first pavilion head and even had the courage to challenge him to take revenge for their sect master. However, they were terrified of the #1 expert in the world, Justice. Ever since Justice failed to kill Ling Tian, his prestige had been on the decline. However, this did not include the members of Above Heavens. Those from Above Heavens were extremely clear that 16 of their top-notch experts had been single-handedly defeated by Justice when they attempted to surround him. Furthermore, they were defeated in a head-on battle. What kind of strength would this require? Thus, not a single person from Above Heavens was willing or dared to face an invincible opponent like this. They did not even have the guts to put their lives on the line. There was the #1 assassin in the world. Behind him, the #1 expert in the world, Justice, had appeared. That was an opponent that not a single person from Above Heavens would be able to defeat. Furthermore, the pillar of support for Above Heavens had already died. How would they be able to continue fighting like this? The 3 white-haired elders tried to stabilize the situation and roared out orders for the crowd to attack. However, the morale of the crowd had already collapsed and there was no turning back. A couple of them were attacking randomly, some were looking around, and others already had the intention to escape. In truth, if they hadn't fallen into a mess, Ling Tian was already thoroughly exhausted, and Justice would definitely have to be distracted in order to protect Ling Tian. As long as they worked together, they definitely had the ability to put up and fight, and Ling Tian would definitely be dragged down with them. However, their morale was already lost and everyone had their own thoughts. How would they be able to work together to surround Justice? Ling Tian and Justice weaved about in the crowd and miserable groans could be heard all around. Broken limbs flew in all directions and the smell of blood grew denser and denser in the hall, crushing the courage of the Above Heavens experts even further. Seeing their martial brothers and seniors dying a miserable death, with dismembered body parts flying around in all directions, and the large hall where they used to discuss matters being transformed into a river of blood, the extreme fear brought about by the threat of death truly drove them crazy. Finally, one of them could no longer suppress the fear in his heart and threw away his weapon with a crazed roar before running out of the hall. Ling Tian tightly gripped his sword and did not bother stopping those who were running. Instead, he became even crueler towards those still present in the hall. With a wave of his arm, Justice sent a white-haired elder flying and sent out a flurry of ferocious attacks at the 7 or 8 individuals around him. With the first abandoning the battle, there would be the second and third a broken bar. Right at this moment, the 3 inner court elders from above heavens looked at each other. With their hearts being connected, they let out a roar and their figures shot towards Ling Tian, launching an attack in unison. The 3 of them had been working together for many years and their hearts and thoughts were as one. At this moment, the battle intent of their above heavens members had already been crushed and there wasn't the slightest chance for victory. If they were to fight Justice, who was in his best condition, they would only be able to tie him down at the very most and would not have the chance to injure Justice at all. Instead, they might end up being killed by him. On the contrary, the first pavilion head was already severely injured after a long period of battle and was obviously exhausted. Since the destruction of their above heavens was near, they might as well place their lives on the line. Even if they couldn't kill Justice, they would kill the first pavilion head to take revenge for their sect master. This attack of theirs combined their lifetime worth of cultivation. Before the attack even arrived, the violent winds from the attack were extremely suffocating. Ling Tian, who was severely injured, obviously wouldn't be able to deal with such an attack. Justice looked to the side and noticed Ling Tian's predicament. He immediately let out a crisp cry and was about to charge forward to save Ling Tian. Right at this moment, a familiar voice sounded by Ling Tian's ears. Walk towards the entrance of the hall. Ling Tian did not even hesitate and made a somersault towards the entrance of the hall. Moving from his current position and towards the entrance of the hall would increase the distance between him and Justice. If anything happened, even Justice might not be able to save Ling Tian in time. For Ling Tian, who was already thoroughly exhausted, to move away from Justice, this was akin to seeking his own death. No matter what, charging towards the entrance of the hall was an extremely foolish decision. If it was anyone else who instructed him to do so, not only would Ling Tian defy those orders, he might even turn around and give the person a slash instead. The only exception would be the owner of the voice. As long as the owner of this voice gave an order, Ling Tian wouldn't hesitate even if he had to enter an ocean of blades and a sea of fire. The owner of the voice was Ling Tian. Ling Tian could already tell that this voice belonged to Ling Tian. Thus, Ling Tian did not hesitate in the slightest. Even if the entrance of the hall was a mountain of blades and a sea of fire, Ling Tian would not hesitate with those instructions. Little breath. Are you crazy? Where are you going? Are you seeking your death? Stand there and stop moving. This seed will ensure your safety. Justice deflected a few blades and was thoroughly enraged when he realized that Ling Tian had moved out of his range of protection. While the morale of the above heavens experts had been destroyed, not all were defeated. Justice was still a man and he wasn't a deity. He wouldn't be able to do something that was out of a human's ability. Apart from the frightened above heavens expert who had escaped, there wasn't anyone else by the entrance of the hall. With the force of the attack being accumulated, and the entrance being out of Justice's range, wasn't Ling Tian seeking death? Not to mention Justice being depressed, even the 3 elders were completely bewildered. To think that Ling Tian would dodge in the wrong direction. Under the lock of their auras, the 3 of them slashed down with full force. This would probably be the last chance for them to take revenge for their sect master. With Ling Tian's current strength, it would already be extremely difficult for him to block 2 swords. However, it would be impossible for him to avoid the 3rd sword. If this sword landed, he would be dead for sure. Ling Tian's face was calm and with his sword tilted he received the incoming sword strike calmly. Since his young noble instructed him to come to the entrance, his young noble must have his own intentions. Furthermore, if his young noble was here, it wouldn't be so easy for him to die. Thus, Ling Tian was confident that he would be safe. However, Ling Tian never imagined that Ling Tian wouldn't take action. The 3rd sword cleaved down towards Ling Tian's neck with a violent wind. Ling Tian felt a tinge of hopelessness in his heart. Why was it like this? Right at this moment, Ling Tian had not realized that as he retreated towards the entrance, he was already by Zhao Yuhan's side. Seeing Ling Tian in danger and his life at risk, Zhao Yuhan did not know where her courage came from. Ignoring her weak strength, she lifted up her sword and with a gentle moan, Sparks flew in all directions. Her body was suddenly filled with strength and she had actually blocked the might of the sword before it reached Ling Tian's neck. Chapter 692, A Strange Treatment Method. The consequence of overestimating her strength was severe. The violent energy passed through the sword and Zhao Yuhan felt the bones in her body on the verge of being smashed up and her innards burning. She spat out a large mouthful of blood and this single blow had given her an extremely severe internal injury. However, she stubbornly refused to back down and clenched her teeth, refusing to take even a single step back. This sword of hers also achieved her goal. Ling Tian was alright. Ling Tian's body spun around and avoided the threat from the two other swords. Seeing the blood in Zhao Yuhan's mouth, he felt his heart take and let out a loud roar. His sword flew out of his hand and shot forward like a divine dragon, cutting through the air and piercing through the chest of the white-haired elder who Zhao Yuhan was facing. Heavenly Divine Dragon. This sword strike was truly too sudden and none of them imagined that this sword grandmaster would actually throw out his sword for a lady. Wasn't throwing away his sword akin to throwing away his life? Just when Ling Tian threw out his sword, the sword in Zhao Yuhan's hands could no longer withstand the pressure from the energy and shattered into pieces. Zhao Yuhan began bleeding from all 7 orifices and she weakly collapsed. This was because Ling Tian had managed to throw his sword out and kill the white-haired elder in time. If he was just an instant later, Zhao Yuhan would have probably ended up in the Yellow Springs by now. Ling Tian's body rolled forward and pulled the beauty into his embrace. He then rolled out to the side and narrowly avoided the sword from the white-haired elder. After the sword slashed down, the white-haired elder collapsed slowly onto the ground without any signs of life. At the instant his chest was penetrated by Ling Tian's sword, he had reflexively slashed down. Outside the hall, Ling Tian, who was hidden in the shadows, heaved a sigh of relief and chuckled. "You did not disappoint me indeed." I would be relieved to pair Zhao Yuhan up with Ling Tian. He then let go of the 2 gleaming hidden weapons in his hands. If Zhao Yuhan hadn't charged forward to save Ling Tian would have taken action at the very last moment. Zhao Yuhan had charged forward. While she was severely injured because of this, she had gained Ling Tian's trust and Ling Tian's heart. Ever since he noticed Ling Tian's affection towards Zhao Yuhan, Ling Tian had been planning bitterly. He first used words to nudge Zhao Yuhan into a trap before making use of the fame of the first pavilion head to let Zhao Yuhan underestimate Ling Tian. After that, he made Zhao Yuhan work together with Ling Tian and allowed her to as shockingly realize that this person who she did not place in her sights was actually her perfect idol. With her previous underestimation as a foundation, a woman's thoughts would enter into a strange and complicated state. She would be apologetic and filled with curiosity and a desire to be close. Because Ling Tian did not do anything when she underestimated him, this would make Ling Tian seem all the more like a gentleman. At the very end, after she witnessed Ling Tian's divine strength, he then arranged a show of the beauty saving the hero and success would come naturally a broken bar. This way, the wooden block like Ling Tian would have to accept Zhao Yuhan's favor and would be completely loyal to her. Even if Zhao Yuhan did not have any goodwill towards Ling Tian, after this life and death incident, there would definitely be a change in her heart. At this moment, if Ling Tian pestered her a broken bar, Ling Tian chuckled delightfully before shaking his head. Just as the saying goes, a fiery woman is afraid of a gentleman's pestering. Hehe, a broken bar. Ling Tian was definitely extremely satisfied with his own plan. While both Ling Tian and Zhao Yuhan were severely injured with this plan of his, with Ling Tian's mystical medicine and the medical saint Justice around, it would be difficult for them to die even if they wanted to. When thinking about Ling Tian's severe injuries, Ling Tian let out 2 dry coughs with guilt in his heart. If Ling Tian was able to escape unscathed, he originally intended to personally take action to make Ling Tian suffer a bit so that the beauty would have the chance to take action a broken bar. 7 to 8 figures appeared from the outside and began launching a massacre towards all the escapees of above heavens. From afar, The glow of fire could be seen in 3 directions and the sound of shouting could be heard. A trace of blood could be seen on Ling Tian's lips as he escaped from the hall with the weak Yuhan in his arms. A trace of anxiousness could be seen on the face of this stone-faced assassin. Behind him, the 2 white-haired elders were giving chase with their faces red. Ling Tian snorted. With his plan completed, it was time for the 2 temporary actors to leave the stage. How would Ling Tian allow the 2 of them to harm Ling Tian in front of him? It was only for him to make a complete show previously. If he still allowed them to harm Ling Tian, he would truly be an idiot. His figure drifted into the air and he let out a flurry of kicks. Brandishing his sword, a sea of stars was sent out. He then landed on the ground and let out a strange cry mimicking the famous martial artist Bruce Lee. The 2 of them only had the first pavilion head in their sights and they only wanted to kill this enemy who had assassinated their sect master. They wanted to skin him alive and pull out his tendons to vent their anger. How could they still bother about anyone else at this moment? They naturally wouldn't think that there was someone who had been lying in wait for a long time already. Furthermore, he was even more frightening than the first pavilion head. With 2 loud thuds, the 2 were struck in the chest. They were sent spinning in the air and they each spat out a mouthful of blood along the way. When they heard the strange cry from Ling Tian at the end, they almost fainted from anger. It was truly infuriating for a peerless expert as such to ambush others in such a despicable manner. While they could tell that they would definitely lose in a head-on battle, the most infuriating thing was the fact that he did not even give them the chance to fight head-on. This was the greatest humiliation, a humiliation that couldn't be washed away even in death. Their figures spun in the air as they spat out blood along the way. While they wanted to open their mouths to curse, they couldn't stop the blood spewing out from their mouths and couldn't let out a single sound. After they finally stopped their bodies from spinning, burning rage could be seen in their eyes. Opening their bloodied mouths, they wanted to let out a series of cursing. Before the 2 of them could even let out a sound, a brilliant train of light engulfed their bodies. Despicably broken bar. A broken bar, their final miserably cry before their death. Despicably broken bar. This old man isn't convinced a broken bar. A cry of unwillingness. Ling Tian snorted coldly and wiped the heaven splitter on their clothes with disdain. Who asked all of you to be convinced? I only want all of you dead. At this moment, Ling Tian dashed over with Yuhan in his arms and cried out in anxiousness, "Young noble, her, here a broken bar, her injuries are severe." Ling Tian let out an AO sound before placing his fingers on Yuhan's wrist and sent his inner chi in to investigate her situation. Yuhan's inner strength was naturally a great distance away from the white-haired elder. With their swords colliding, her innards were jolted badly. However, she did not take a single step back in order to protect Ling Tian's safety. Her dainty figure had endured the full force of the attack. If not for that white-haired elder being engaged in an intense battle before this, the outcome of this collision would be uncertain. However, Yuhan had only fallen unconscious, and while her injuries were severe, there wasn't a threat to her life. With Ling Tian's cultivation, he should have been able to tell. However, with his heart being in a complete mess because of his worrying, he truly couldn't tell. Ling Tian felt Yuhan's pulse with a look of worry on his face. "Jian, you have to be mentally prepared. Miss Zhao's injuries aren't looking good." Ling Tian was dumbstruck and his shoulders slumped down with the rims of his eyes turning red. "Miss Zhao's injuries are all because she wanted to save you. It's a broken bar. Why must the life of a lady be so fragilely broken bar?" Ling Tian said with a heavy tone, as though Yuhan was about to die and there was no hope of saving her. "Young noble, your methods can move the heavens. Please save her." "Right. Justice is a medical saint. Should I plead to him?" Ling Tian crashed to the ground on his knees. "These injuries are broken bar. Even justice may not be able to treat them. If we really want to save her, it isn't impossible, but a broken bar, there is a big problem." Ling Tian pondered for a moment and looked as though he was thinking of a solution. "Furthermore, it will exhaust a large amount of energy and one must be a virgin. A broken bar." The moment Ling Tian heard that there was hope, he looked as though he was revived and immediately said, "Young noble, I am still a virgin. A broken bar. I am also not afraid of exhausting my inner chi. A broken bar, a broken bar, a broken bar." Hearing those words, Ling Tian almost wanted to burst out laughing. But for the plan in his heart, he could only forcefully suppress his laughter. Taking a peek into the hall, Justice had already controlled the situation. The few Ling family experts on the outside had also gotten rid of the escaping above heaven's disciple and were killing their way into the hall. Ling Tian's eyeballs spun around and he said, "There is only a single way to treat her. It requires the body of a virgin, the realm of Tian, and a pure yang energy. Through your mouth, you must transmit pure yang energy to her body and send it all throughout her meridians. At the same time, when your energy reaches her acupoints, you have to use your palm to inject energy and massage her acupoints to speed up her blood flow and ensure that energy can flow smoothly." Wouldn't that mean that he would have to touch her all over, while having his lips touch hers at the same time? Ling Jian's face turned red as he heard that and became flustered. "Young noble, there's a broken bar, there's a broken bar, that a broken bar, that a broken bar." Ling Jian glared at him and continued, feeling troubled. "Is her life more important or her chastity? You are the only one who can save her at this moment. This young noble isn't a virgin any longer and cannot be of any help. Don't interrupt me, I am not done yet." Ling Jian remained silent and perched his ears to listen. A broken bar at the same time, the injuries on her body would be excreted from her pores. Take note, throughout this process, you will have to ensure that there is fresh air on the surface of her skin. The moment the poison from the body is excreted, it has to be dispersed into the air. If it is blocked by clothes, it will enter back into the body and assault her heart. At that time, even a celestial wouldn't be able to save her. She broken bar, she still has to take off all her clothes? These a broken bar, Ling Jian stammered with sweat all over his face. Chapter 693, Success. However, this is absolutely necessary, Ling Tian said solemnly. Ling Jian, this matter concerns life and death. Besides, Miss Zhao only turned out this way to save you a broken bar. Of course, if you feel troubled, we can forget about this matter. You can allow her to enter her afterlife with her chaste body. It shall be your own choice. Ling Jian's face flushed red as he stammered. "A broken bar, how am I someone like that? Miss Zhao turned out this way in order to save me. How can I watch by the side without doing anything? Wouldn't I be worse than a beast?" Ling Tian was overjoyed in his heart and was waiting for those words from Ling Jian. He then continued calmly, "What are you waiting for? This matter cannot be delayed. The longer you drag it out, the more dangerous her internal injuries will be. Quickly follow me and find a quiet place for you to treat Miss Zhao's injuries. I will guard the two of you." The most important matter at hand would be to treat her critical injuries. Justice was about to be done with matters, and with his wisdom he would definitely be able to see through this plot. Ling Tian wasn't willing to let this medical saint interfere in his plans. Besides, while Zhao Yuhan's injuries were severe, they definitely weren't fatal. If she ends up waking up a broken bar. Indeed, the moment Ling Tian said those words, Ling Jian became anxious. Looking at Zhao Yuhan's complexion, Ling Jian felt as though her complexion took a turn for the worse and her breathing became heavier. A broken bar. Just this alone wouldn't be enough, and it would only be able to save her life. If things go wrong, there may be severe repercussions and she may be paralyzed for life. A crisp voice could be heard. However, the voice seemed to be holding something in with great difficulty. This voice belonged to Justice. He then said slowly with the sagacious aura of a medical saint, "If you want to ensure that she makes a full recovery, you have to adjust her yin with your yang, the heavens and earth becoming one, and ensure that both vital yin and vital yang becomes one." Ling Jian was startled. "Ah, really?" Ling Tian glared at Justice and scolded, "Lecher." Justice smiled in response, "You are talking about yourself, right?" Ling Jian, "Let me tell you, actually a broken bar." Ling Tian quickly corrected himself and interrupted Justice. "Ling Jian, it was my oversight previously, and Senior Justice's words are right. Quickly follow me and find a quiet place to save her in case anything goes wrong." He then pulled Ling Jian out and did not bother saying anything else to Justice. When the two figures departed, Justice's solemn face suddenly burst out into laughter as he muttered to himself, "This Ling Tian is truly too a broken bar talented." In a small room at the above heavens sect, the windows and doors were shut tight. Ling Tian was currently patrolling the vicinity as he eavesdropped on what was going on in the room. In the room, Ling Tian seemed to be hesitating before the sound of clothes being taken off sounded. Ling Tian's brows were raised in excitement and he could not help but clap his hands. A long while later, Ling Tian's heavy breathing could be heard as though he was exerting a great deal of force. Ling Tian held onto his stomach and laughed soundlessly until his sides ached. All of a sudden a paw sound could be heard as though someone was slapped hard in the face. An embarrassed cry could then be heard. "Lecture, what are you doing?" Ling Tian's flustered voice could be heard. A broken bar, I am trying to a broken bar to save a broken bar, save you a broken bar, don't misunderstand a broken bar, you are severely injured and a broken bar, this is the only way to save you. A broken bar, woo woo woo, a broken bar, the sound of whimpering could be heard. That a broken bar, Ling Tian sounded like he wanted to give an explanation but couldn't say a thing. How will I have the face to meet anyone in the future? Woo woo woo, a broken bar, I don't want to live anymore. Woo woo woo, a broken bar, the lady's voice was full of grief. Ling Tian gave her a thumbs up. Fantastic. She is truly fantastic. These are truly the best words to say at this moment. After stammering for a long time, Ling Tian finally managed to force some words out. I was really trying to treat your injury as a broken bar. His voice became softer and softer, knowing that he was in the wrong. At this moment, Ling Tian finally realized that he had never heard about such a treatment method before. A broken bar. However, Ling Tian was previously too flustered with worry and could not be bothered about whether the treatment method was logical. A broken bar. Hearing those words, the voice of the woman became louder and was filled with grief and anger. Treat my injuries? For you to treat my injuries in such a manner, you are defiling my innocence. I might as well die. Woo woo woo, a broken bar, I am the daughter of a good family. How can I let you trample over my innocence like that? You a broken bar, you lecher. I am really not a lecher. Ling Tian was truly exasperated. A broken bar, why don't a broken bar I take responsibility for you? Responsibility? How will you take responsibility? The female voice continued. Ling Tian, who was on the outside, was full of praise. A broken bar, how about I marry you? Would that be enough? Ling Tian's pitiful voice sounded. Without even looking, Ling Tian knew that this subordinate of his was definitely had a face covered with sweat. You a broken bar, lecher. You a broken bar, why does it seem like you're suffering a huge loss? Do you think this miss cares about that? HMPH. If you are so unwilling, a broken bar, the woman's voice whined with a tinge of embarrassment and anger. No, a broken bar, no. It isn't a loss, it isn't a loss, Ling Tian said. A broken bar, I earned a broken bar. A voice of extreme embarrassment sounded as she reprimanded. Are you doing a business deal? What do you mean by earning or losing? Fool. Hehe, a broken bar, hehe, a broken bar. A wave of foolish laughter could be heard. Turn around. Zhao Yuhan's voice sounded. Why? Ling Tian was stunned. A broken bar, I am going to put on my clothes. Zhao Yuhan flew into a rage. Turn around. You pig. A broken bar, a broken bar. Ling Tian hurriedly nodded his head, following which, the sound of clothes rustling could be heard, followed by a long period of silence, following which, the two of them whispered to each other, but Ling Tian couldn't hear those words clearly. Just when he was about to circulate his inner chi to eavesdrop, he heard a wave of a pa sounds. Ling Tian immediately retreated a couple of feet away and covered his ears with disgust. Isn't their progression too fast? The sheer speed of their progression is superior to even this young nobly broken bar. Ling Tian hid in a corner sneakily as he looked around carefully. If someone found out that the world-famous young noble Ling Tian was eavesdropping on his number one subordinate, he would truly be embarrassed. A long while later, The door creaked open and Ling Tian walked out full of energy. He didn't seem as though he had just been through a large battle and was full of energy with his spirits high. He looked as though he would be able to defeat 2 elephants even they were placed before him. Zhao Yuhan followed behind with her face flushed red as she twiddled with the corner of his shirt. Her face was lowered as she looked at her dress and carefully afraid that her clothes would look messy and get teased by others. While her lips were pouted angrily, the joy in her eyes betrayed her true emotions. Young noble, are you still there? Miss Zhao is alright. I have saved her already. Young nobly broken bar Ling Tian cried out gleefully the moment he exited the room. How could he not share such a joyful matter with a young noble? Pig, you are a pig, Ling Tian cursed in his heart. How can Ling Tian call out for him the moment he comes out? Isn't this akin to openly saying that there was someone keeping guard on the outside when her injuries were being treated? How would a lady like her be able to face anyone in the future? If Zhao Yuhan had some doubts and asks a few questions, she would be able to easily find out this matter was Ling Tian's doing. From the beginning to the end, it was all part of Ling Tian's plans. At that time, things would truly be awkward a broken bar. However, since Ling Tian had already cried out for him, it would be even more suspicious if he didn't appear. Helpless, he could only reluctantly walk out. I am over here. Ah? Exclamation mark. Indeed. A loud gasp could be heard and Zhao Yuhan's face changed color as she looked at Ling Tian. Young noble Ling a broken bar Crown Prince Ling a broken bar was outside. They in a broken bar. Ling Tian had a big smile on his face as he continued, if not for young noble guarding the place for us, your injuries wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Senior Justice had even asked me to ensure that the heavens and earth become one, but you were okay before I even did so. Broken bar. Pig, you are a pig, stupid pig. Zhao Yuhan's face was completely red and she began pinching Ling Tian all over in frustration and embarrassment. Era broken bar ra aha broken bar kapha broken bar you two continue yeah broken bar You guys continue and I shall take my leave. This was naturally the best time for him to make his escape. After leaving behind those words, Ling Tian escaped. Ling Tian's face contorted in pain as a pair of dainty hands pinched him all over his arms, shoulders, back, thighs. A broken bar 360 degrees in a single pinch. A broken bar 180 degrees. A broken bar 720 degrees. A broken bar. A broken bar. Some details are best left out. A broken bar. The next day morning. At this moment, the Green Ripple Immortal Park still had smoke rising up from many areas and the previously beauty of the place was completely destroyed. There wasn't the slightest bit of elegance from before. Ling Tian stood on top of the wall and let out a long sigh as he looked around. After a full night of battle, not only was above heavens wiped out from the face of the continent, the Zhao family was also wiped out alongside it. The past #1 financial magnate in the world had been reduced to such a state. Both Ling Tian and Li Zhu walked over like two fairies. In the battle last night, the three of them had split up to watch over a separate district. Looking at the expression on both of their faces, Ling Tian knew that nothing went wrong. In the battle last night, everything in the western courtyard went well. Of the 313 above heaven's disciples, not a single one escaped alive. 290 of them were killed on the spot and 23 captured. However, about 100-odd individuals from the western courtyard died. Thankfully, the few important individuals were safe. Li Zhu said calmly. Chapter 694, Pacifying the Southeast. I understand. Ling Tian nodded his head, his face passive, not showing any sort of satisfaction nor disappointment. Zhao Fengyang and Zhao Fenghan, as well as the various managers from the Zhao family, sat by the side with haggard faces. Towards the deaths in the Zhao family, Ling Tian naturally would not voice out any of his opinions to them. If he appeared to be too saddened, then with their superficial ties binding them together, it would only seem artificial. However, if he appeared too nonchalant, then it would appear too harsh towards the Zhao family. In the battle at the Zhaoxiang area, None of the 330 above heavens disciples managed to escape. We've killed a total of 216 of them, and captured the other 114. Statistics from the family show that 87 people died in the war, with Ling 27 and Ling 29 seriously injured, but in no danger to their lives, Ling Tian reported. From the result of the two, one could see that Ling Tian was still lacking in viciousness compared to Li Zhu. Li Zhu had practically killed off everyone, whereas Ling Tian still left a couple of hundred captives. Bury the dead, and treat the wounded properly. Ling Tian blandly nodded. The above heavens sect had a total of 1,537 death warriors, and we have confirmed that all of them died. Concerning the divine wind guards of the family, out of 5,000, over 3,700 were killed, with 600 seriously wounded. There are no light wounds. Ling 32, 35, and 39 are all seriously injured. Ling 38 lost an arm, Ling 34 was disabled in one of his eyes, and also had his left leg broken. Ling Kai's face was mournful. While he had already changed into a fresh set of clothes, the blood from his chest continued to seep through, so obviously, his injuries were not light as well. This battle caused us to suffer disastrous losses, and if not for Sister Chen and Lady Zhu that provided aid in the nick of time, I'm afraid our losses would have been more severe. Ling Kai had betrayed young noble's hopes, causing many of our brothers to suffer. I ask young noble to hand out an appropriate punishment. Zhao Fingyang and Zhao Finghan's expressions paled at this news. The Divine Wind Guards were the most elite troops of the Zhao family. The Zhao family had activated all 5,000 of them yesterday for the sake for getting it over once and for all. But never in their dreams did they expect that one battle would cause all the foundations to be wiped out. The brothers faced the heavens and sighed, no longer having any words to say. From today on, the Zhao family no longer had any more military strength. 1,500 death warriors? They actually could get rid of 3,700 guards that were led by the top 10 assassins, and heavily injure 600. Even my Ling family brothers have 3 grievously wounded, with 2 crippled. Ling Yang was also shocked to the core. Ever since the 50 brothers had mastered their skill sets, there had not been a case of them suffering from injuries, be it warring among thousands of soldiers on the battlefield or assassinating someone from the imperial palace. All their missions were successful without any hitches. Even when they were tasked to gain hegemony over an area, they had all succeeded without question. Even if they were injured, it was not to the point of being crippled, but today a broken bar. Including himself, everyone had been confident that when the 50 brothers all joined hands, in addition to the 6 from the first pavilion, this force was enough to move unhindered. Under the heavens, there was only a minute number who could withstand such strength, maybe even none. But the cruel truth was shown in front of them, that while their strengths were humongous, it was not something that couldn't be defeated. In order to overcome the 1,000-odd death warriors in their training grounds, Ling Kai had brought 10 brothers with him, together with the Divine Wind Guards, and yet they had to pay the price of over 3,000 of the guard members. This was twice the number of deaths. They had not even counted the injured and crippled within the Ling family, as well as the wounds on the leader Ling Kai. If not for the timely rescue of Li Zhu and Ling Chen, Ling Tian could imagine that he would have received the news of the death of his brothers. And not just one of them. Just how elite were the death warriors of the above heavens sect? This sort of prowess was already above that of Ling Tian's blood iron warriors. What a frightening prowess! What a frightening bunch of elite troops! If the numbers were evenly matched, what sort of price would he then need to pay? Even with his unflustered attitude, Ling Tian could not help but have some lingering fears. He sighed deeply before saying, "Have a good rest." In addition, have you found out the training methods for the above heavens death warriors? Ling Kai respectfully replied, "I was aware the young noble would ask about this. The arrangements have been done, and all of the teaching methods are in my hands. Furthermore, the contents include the experiences of the thousands who failed." Ling Yan nodded his head, and in the end, could not hold in his anxiety to ask, "What about Ling 38 and 34? How are they holding it in?" "Rest assured, young noble, they are still fine." Ling Dian and Ling Yun had brought along the heaven reversing restoration pill that Justice had concocted along this time, and using that, have protected their vitals. Their lives are no longer in danger. Ling Kai blinked his eyes rapidly, holding back the hot tears that threatened to spill out. This time, the battle that took place was extremely intense. In their final throes, the Death Warriors were holding their own against 10 people each. Their battle strengths were off the charts, and furthermore, all were unafraid of dying. To still be able to hold on to their lives could already be considered a blessing. Pausing for a moment, he then continued, "The injuries of our brothers were mostly caused by the trading of lives. The Jade Fragment war tactics of the Above Heavens Death Warriors were much crueler compared to our Ling family's Blood Iron, and much more effective." I understand, Ling Tian nodded. "In a while, I'll go pay them a visit." At this moment, Ling Tian walked over, sporting a pale complexion as he spoke, "Young noble, for the headquarters of Above Heavens, none of them remained alive. In addition to Meng Fanyan, no one was spared, including all the head instructors. If the previous injuries that were reported just now were considered a normal occurrence, then the words spoken by Ling Tian could be considered a divine equalizer." Hearing such good news, Zhao Fengyang and Zhao Fenghan all revealed expressions of joy. The sword of Damocles that had always hung over the heads of the Zhao family members had finally been eradicated. When the two powers were cooperating, they were naturally on harmonious terms. However, the disciples from the Above Heavens sect always placed themselves at the top, causing the Zhao family members to have to restrain their anger. Furthermore, they were becoming more unbridled even within the Zhao family's compound, which had made the Zhao family even angrier. They did not dare to complain as they required the help of the Above Heavens sect to conquer the world. However, both the masters of the Zhao family had long begun discussions in secret on how to get rid of the Above Heavens sect after they had conquered the world. No matter what, there would come a day when their relationship would come to an end. They had just moved the date forward by a few years. Right now, upon hearing that the entire Above Heavens sect had been annihilated, with Meng Fanyan who was akin to a deity having perished at the hands of Ling Tian, this meant that their malignant tumor had already been removed. How could the Zhao family, who had been suppressed for so long, not feel happy? The news of Meng Fanyan's death replaced the pain and sadness of the large number of casualties that was hanging in the air previously. Zhao Fenghan and Zhao Fengyang even felt that, for such an outcome, the number of sacrifices was justified. Even if a few more people were to be thrown in the pit, it would still be worth it. "Oh, about your wounds, how are they? Are they serious?" Gazing at Ling Tian's pale complexion, Ling Tian felt a sense of worry. "My injuries are of no concern. If not for the armor that young noble gave to me, I'm afraid I would not have the chance to report to you." Ling Tian laughed bitterly, before stuttering as he lowered his head to Ling Tian's ear. "Young noble, that lass ended up being angry at me for a whole night." As he spoke, he glanced around shiftily before lightly pulling up his sleeve, bearing a bitter expression as he continued, "Look, my entire body turned out to be like this. This lass is really fierce." Ling Tian's entire arm was actually decorated with many bruises all over. Ling Tian was rendered completely speechless. This sort of henpecked conduct from Ling Tian he had not seen for quite a while. The last time was when Li Zhu was making life difficult for him. However, this could be said to be his own just desserts, for not considering the lady's image before acting. It would be weird if she did not throw a tantrum. Ling Tian could only laugh helplessly in response. Zhao Yuhan dawdled as she too slowly strolled over, seemingly a little bashful, as she avoided looking at Ling Tian directly. Ling Tian had just turned over to look at her, but Zhao Yuhan immediately lowered her face as she blushed. However, just a second after, she lifted her head again, fiercely staring back at Ling Tian. In the entire Ling Zhao families, the only person who had the guts to gaze at Ling Tian this way would probably be this big miss here. Most likely, there was no precedent, and there would also be nobody who would continue this in the future. Ling Tian laughed, staring at her with a mischievous look on his face as he said, "Miss Zhao, I trust that you are in good health. Your body should be fine, right? Thank you for the concern. It's all thanks to the contributions by Crown Prince that I can feel a lot better." Zhao Yuhan huffed. "Crown Prince has really schemed wonderfully. It's just that to scheme against a small girl is a little too underhanded of you." Ling Tian laughed louder as he replied, "Miss, Don't stand on ceremony. Wasn't this in accordance with your wishes? I only helped Miss fulfill her dreams. You don't need to be too grateful towards me. Everyone here knows that I'm a person who only helps but doesn't expect anything in return. That's right, for this matter, Justice from Beyond Heavens has really put in quite a bit of effort. If you really wish to thank someone, then you should thank him. The stuff about yin and yang negating each other, it was all taught by him. Zhao Yuhan was so angered that her breath caught in her throat. She could only resort to stamping her feet and pout. Seeing Ling Tian laughing like an idiot at the corner, she could not resist but roll her eyes at him. It's all your fault. Ling Tian and Li Zhu looked confused. Why did Ling Tian and Zhao Yuhan start pointing daggers at each other after merely a night? Their sentences were loaded with gunpowder, and Zhao Yuhan's attitude was unlike her previous aloof and cold self. Furthermore, what yin and yang negating each other, what was all of this? The two ladies had their curiosity piqued, and immediately pulled Zhao Yuhan to the side to interrogate her. Zhao Yuhan actually did not wish to say anything. After all, this matter was a little embarrassing to her. However, Ling Tian knew that this was his chance to brag to the two ladies who were his partners. Thus, he chose to say it out openly, and claim credit for his efforts. Wasn't this killing two birds with one stone? After hearing her hatefully finish her story with a reddened face, Li Zhu and Ling Tian both burst into laughter as well. They only felt that Ling Tian was too mischievous this time around, and in addition, there was still Justice, that old man who knew no shame. What sort of esteemed senior was he? That guy deserved a beating. The two ladies immediately came to the same conclusion after that. Ling Tian, that jerk, really knew his way around ladies. It seemed like they had to keep a close eye on him thereafter. If they did not do so, maybe one day, they would return to see the harem being filled with a few more sisters. HMPH. The two shared a sly glance at each other, coming to a tacit mutual understanding. Ling Tian still remained unaware that it was his prank that was not a prank that completely destroyed his perfect dream of being able to flirt with ladies all around. If he were to find out, his smiling expression right now would completely devolve into that of sobbing bitterly. As the saying goes, the evil we bring upon ourselves is the hardest to bear. A family head, now that the above heavens sect has been eradicated, what does the Zhao family intend to do in the future? Ling Tian laughed as he faced Zhao Fenghan, speaking in a sincere tone. My grandfather has always been reminiscing about the days spent with a family head, and the rescue this time was also because His Majesty, my grandfather, had given consent to it. Since the few of you are already getting along in age, how about living harmoniously under a roof, enjoying what life has to offer together in the twilight years of one's life? Wouldn't that be nice? Chapter 695, Ling Tian match makes. Zhao Fenghan laughed bitterly, looking at Green Ripple Immortal Park where half of it had turned into ruins. After a long time, he sighed in desolation before speaking. Ling Tian, Crown Prince, this Zhao has a request to make. Please speak your mind. Ling Tian lightly smiled, guessing his intentions. Zhao Fenghan sucked in a deep breath of air, a lonely aura surfacing between his brows as he slowly said, I hope that Crown Prince can treat the various civilians of my southeastern area kindly, and as for my troops, Crown Prince may use what can be used. Those that are not needed, please do not harm them. Allow them to have their freedom once again, removing their armors and returning back to the farms. Would that be possible? A family head is overthinking things. These two matters, even if you did not speak of them, I was also planning to handle them in this manner. Ling Tian unhesitatingly agreed as he smiled. A strong army and valiant soldiers are the foundations of any country. How would I be able to let go of them? As for the civilians, they will be citizens of my divine prefecture empire in the future, sharing the same vision. For those soldiers who are tired of the battlefield, they may return at any time. Good. Zhao Fenghan loudly hollered. Since Crown Prince has this intention, Then the Zhao can announce right here that the Zhao family shall no longer exist in the southeast. I'll move my entire clan over to Skybearing and enjoy my twilight years with that old brother of mine. The moment he finished speaking, the entire place fell into absolute silence. Only the sounds of sharp breaths were heard. Everyone present clearly understood the severity behind the words that the Zhao family head had spoken. This especially rang true for those in the Zhao family. They were even more clear what it meant for Zhao Fenghan to come to this decision. By moving the entire family over to Skybearing, the Zhao family would cease to exist in the southeast. The millennium-long efforts of their ancestors would be given up. A total of 3,000 miles of mountains and rivers would change hands. The #1 financial magnate of the world would disappear and turn into history. As for the troops, war horses, and generals of the Zhao family, they would have a permanent handicap, as all of them would follow the Zhao family to be stationed within Skybearing. Within the Divine Prefecture Empire, their lives would all be held in the hand of the Emperor. Even if they had any plans to be disloyal, how much chaos could they incite? They had lost the support of the behemoth that was the Zhao family. Even if you had heaven-defying talent, how could a person's strength go against an entire empire? This move would not only remove the hidden problem that was the Zhao family for the Ling family but would also convert them to a force that would support them in their cause. Ling Tian smiled as he looked at Zhao Fenghan meaningfully. He gently replied, "This spirit of Zhao family head is indeed earth-shaking. Ling Tian admires you." Novel full. Zhao Fenghan's face reddened at the praise. He dryly laughed in return. "Crown Prince is joking. I'm just saying this in my capacity as the family head of the Zhao family. This matter will still need to be discussed with my children and grandchildren. I just decided to make my stand clear early, to prevent any potential troubles." Ling Tian nodded in reply but did not continue the conversation. Zhao Fenghan had already made his words clear. If he spoke further, then it would make him seem petty and would spoil this perfect scenario. Forget it, let him be the evildoer this time. The Zhao family was undergoing huge changes at the moment. Although their biggest cancer these few years, the Above Heavens sect, had been taken out, it was a Pyrrhic victory, with a great amount of their strength being sapped away. But no matter what, their greatest danger was now behind them. From now onward, they could take their time to replenish their forces, and to rise back up again was not an impossibility. Furthermore, without the handicap that was the Above Heavens sect, the rise of the Zhao family would be even harder to curb. The Zhao family did not lack people with knowledge and wisdom. This part was naturally clearly evident. They even didn't lack people with the ambition to conquer the entire world. While they might choose to temporarily be stationed under the Ling family as officials, but this was mainly with the intention to endure humiliation as part of an important mission. The moment they were fully fledged and developed, they would not hesitate to rip aside all pretenses. For their goal of hegemony, how would they allow these sort of trivial emotions and gratitude bind them? But for the Zhao family head, Zhao Fenghan, to be able to extrapolate this far, then how could the detailed and meticulous Ling Tian not be able to do so? How would he even overlook this point? Since he could annihilate the Above Heavens, then what more effort would it require to finish off a half-dead Zhao family? Even if he were to stay his hand based on the respect for Zhao Fenghan as the family head and based on his granddaughter Zhao Yanzu, what about the future? The moment his clansmen displayed any suspicious movements or even harbored suspicious thoughts, it would be enough for the entire family to be sent into the pits of hell. How could Ling Tian, who was far-sighted, allow the Zhao family to have the chance to make a comeback? Even if we were to take 10,000 steps back and say that Ling Tian would not act against the Zhao family currently, so long as their foundations remained in the southeast, Ling Tian would one day employ vicious methods to cripple the governing power of the Zhao family. For such a scenario, the Zhao family would just end up passively receiving the innumerable schemes that Ling Tian would create. Their days would get worse, and they would still not get the chance to make a comeback and rule over the world. In the end, the Zhao family would still have to move to Skybearing to avoid a disaster. However, if they only chose to move at that time instead of now, then things would be vastly different. To say it bluntly, it was akin to not moving when asked to, but only moving after being beaten up. In contrast, if they were to pledge allegiance and move over now, they would definitely be able to maintain a small portion of their forces within the army. Ling Tian was not someone unreasonable, and would not purposely make things difficult for them. In addition, Ling Tian would also be willing to use the Zhao family strategists and military officers. If it was the alternative method, all of these people's talents would go down the drain. Thus, Zhao Fenghan borrowed the opportunity from Ling Tian's words to immediately state that the Zhao family would be moving out of the southeast. By doing things in such a clear-cut manner, not only did he protect the Zhao family, but he managed to completely secure themselves without any losses. This was truly what they called far-sighted and deeply scheming. The Zhao family had indeed lived up to his name. To raise up the topic of shifting over to sky-bearing, there not be any awkwardness as he had a sworn brother over there, and furthermore, there was Zhao Yanzu as the newly instated imperial concubine. Could the Zhao family possibly suffer with these two factors? In addition, releasing a whole 3,000 miles of mountains and rivers. How big a contribution was this? This was akin to pioneering a whole new territory for the empire. Using such a contribution to enter sky-bearing, it was enough to propel them to the level of a noble family in the Divine Prefecture Empire, and furthermore a top-tier one. If we were to put it this way, it seemed that the act of Zhao Fenghan taking advantage of the situation for one's own benefit managed to get them quite a bit in return. However, looking at it another way, even though it was the Zhao family that suggested the merger, the contributions that they offered were definitely not little, which would brand Ling Tian with a black mark in return. For those that were unaware of the situation, they would think that it was Ling Tian that used his domineering strength to force the Zhao family into submission after helping them with their problems. With the facts placed like that, the rumors in the future would definitely be in this direction. To someone like Ling Tian who had just ascended the throne after establishing their country, this sort of criticism was definitely not something good. As such, it was unavoidable for Ling Tian to feel a little uncomfortable. This little play from Zhao Fenghan was not only understood by Ling Tian, but also Li Zhu and Ling Chen. As for the Zhao family's side, Zhao Fengyang could not help but exclaim with delight in his heart. A few others standing by the side also let out smiles of schadenfreude after thinking about the nuances involved. Since it was a hopeless matter to prevent, why not then be more ruthless towards this? Wouldn't it be good to allow everyone to completely ease their worries? Zhao Fengyang laughed as he turned towards Ling Tian and said, "This is a great deed towards us. But it's just that we have to trouble the crown prince to pardon the two of us." Ha ha ha! A broken bar. He laughed long and hard. Ling Tian stared daggers at him, forcing out a chuckle between clenched teeth as he replied, "Second Master Zhao, don't rejoice too early. Your Zhao family put me in such a bad spot, but with grandfather and grandmother present, I definitely can't do anything to the family head. So instead, I'll look for some payment through you. The 100,000 odd soldiers from the Zhao family will all be placed under you. If there are any problems, then don't blame me. The military rod has no feelings to speak of." Zhao Fengyang's face turned bitter as he helplessly replied, "The command from Crown Prince, how would this official not dare to heed it?" His meaning was that before the military order came down, he still had room to breathe. HMPH. The broken bar. Ling Tian coldly snorted in reply. The two of them exchanged glances, before suddenly laughing out in unison. After arranging the procedures for those injured, Zhao Fenghan prepared a huge banquet to entertain Ling Tian's group of people. The two old fellows were extremely clear on the positions of this group. One was to be the emperor in the future, and the others the empress as well as imperial concubines. None of them were insignificant characters. As for those cold-faced youths of Ling Tian's, none of them would be ordinary people in the future. The roles they would play in the future would definitely be of great importance. Treating them well at this point would allow them to avoid any trouble in the future even if they did not get any benefits. The sounds of cheering resounded continuously from the outside, making the atmosphere very lively. On the inside, each person was seated on a mat, and while the numbers were not many, it completely filled up the inner hall. Other than Ling Tian, Ling Chen, Li Zhu, Ling Jian and the others present, those from the Zhao family included Zhao Fenghan, Feng Yang, and a couple of other elderlies, as well as Zhao Yanzu's parents and Zhao Yuhan and her parents. This was something Ling Tian handed to Ling Chen to propose. As the meals were delivered down, everyone happily engaged in merrymaking. Seeing that almost half the wine was drunk and that everyone was approaching the limits of sobriety, Ling Tian laughed as he took the initiative to speak. Actually, there's another matter that I would like to discuss with the various seniors of the Zhao family today. This untalented prince here is going to stoop down low to help my brother and be a matchmaker. May I know if everyone here has any opinions about that? Zhao Fengyang was long prepared for this in his heart and immediately replied, please speak your mind, Crown Prince. We will naturally consider it thoroughly. Good. Ling Tian laughed out, before leaning forward to continue. This Lady Yuhan here is not only pretty but has a virtuous temperament. If Fourth Master and Madam do not mind, how about letting her be the companion of my Divine Prefecture Empire's Divine Sword Duke? Because Yuhan's father was fourth in birth, thus Ling Tian addressed him as the Fourth Master. Half of it was due to respect for the elders, and another half out of respect of Ling Jian. As he spoke, Ling Tian jerked his chin in Ling Jian's direction as he winked. Ling Jian's fingers trembled, and his chopsticks fell to the ground with a clatter as his face immediately turned red. In his heart, he was incomparably depressed as he thought, since when did I become the Divine Sword Duke? Why was I unaware of my own position? When was this done? Zhao Yuhan yelped in embarrassment, turning to leap straight into her mother's bosom to hide her burning face. Fourth Master and his wife exchanged glances as they grinned. Both of them were already prepared for this, and could not help if this crown prince there was trying to mock their daughter. How could her temperament even be described as a virtuous? However, if not for this special matter, how could the two of them even have the authority to sit in this place? In their family, those who were more capable than them were far too numerous in number. In fact, was this not similar to when the human achieves the Tao? Even the poultry and dogs nearby him can ascend to heaven. 1. Chapter 696, Clothed in yellow robes. Looking at the submissive appearance of his daughter, he naturally understood that it was already a done deal. He then replied with a smile, as long as my daughter isn't opposed to it, both my wife and I would naturally be willing. However, we may not be a match for that Divine Sword Duke. Ha ha, I wonder if Miss Yuhan herself is willing? If she isn't willing, a broken bar. Ling Tian chuckled and looked at Zhao Yuhan, who was hiding her head in her mother's embrace with a cheeky smile. Miss Zhao? Are you willing or not? It isn't good for you to continue hiding all the time. You have to give us a certain answer. Could it be that you aren't willing? However, how would a young lady like her be able to say such words openly? If she wasn't willing, all she had to do was to reject it. But a broken bar. Zhao Yuhan began burning from the embarrassment and she could no longer hide in her mother's embrace. Jumping out, she scolded with her face flushed red, since I didn't say that I wasn't willing. I am naturally a broken bar. Big baddie, big baddie. All of you are big baddies. She then covered her face in embarrassment and charged out. Everyone burst out laughing and Zhao Fengyang looked at Ling Tian with a smile. Crown Prince's words are truly straightforward and effective. You made my granddaughter Yuhan run to escape from embarrassment. You must be punished with 3 glasses of wine for this. Ling Tian burst out into laughter and said, not to mention 3 glasses. I would drink even 30 glasses willingly. I am being happy for my brother. Seeing both parties in agreement, Ling Chen and Li Zhu hurriedly urged Ling Jian to take out a token of engagement. After searching his body all over with his face flushed red, he could only find 3 swords on his body and nothing else. Everyone was dumbfounded. This world-famous first pavilion head, a first-ranked duke in the Divine Prefecture Empire, actually had nothing else on him. He was truly too poor. Who would believe such a thing? Ling Tian let out a bitter laugh and took out a jade pendant. Giving a dry laugh, he said, actually, Jian had already handed his possessions to me. This jade pendant, cough cough. While this jade pendant isn't extremely valuable, it is Jian's ancestral jade pendant. Using this as a token of engagement would be the most suitable. Zhao Fenghan hurriedly played along. That's right, That's right, with Crown Prince personally suggesting the engagement and personally presenting this token of engagement. It is a great honor to my Zhao family. Zhao Yuhan's parents thanked Ling Tian and took out a bright red jade hairpin. After exchanging it with Ling Tian's jade pendant, the marriage was set. Ling Tian then went forward to pay his respects and Madame Zhao helped him up with a smile. "We truly aren't a match for Divine Sword Duke." Ling Tian's face flushed red and he laughed awkwardly, not knowing what to say. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they weren't a match for Ling Tian. After all, Ling Tian wasn't only the world-famous first pavilion head, he was also the #1 subordinate of Ling Tian. The Divine Sword Duke was definitely an individual who was high above the rest in the Divine Prefecture Empire. He was definitely a figure with the authority to decide the life and death of the commoners. This was something that anyone could tell, regardless of whether he was Divine Sword Duke of the Divine Prefecture Empire or the world-famous first pavilion head. He wasn't someone that the current Zhao family could be a match for. Furthermore, with Ling Tian personally being the matchmaker, it meant that Zhao Yuhan would be married off as Ling Tian's first wife. Such a position was one that would be a joyous occasion for the previous Zhao family. With the Zhao family's current almost taboo status, if not for Ling Tian having interest in Zhao Yuhan, Ling Tian would never agree to the matter. For Ling Tian to take the initiative to propose this marriage, it could be said that he had given the Zhao family a great deal of face. If the Zhao family still didn't agree to it, they would truly not know what is good or bad. As for the nobility position of Divine Sword Duke, it was naturally something that Ling Tian came up with on the spot. After all, he couldn't possibly ask Zhao Yuhan to marry his a subordinate or a study attendant, right? Since Ling Tian did not have any official position or title at the moment, Ling Tian could only make use of the imperial authority prematurely and grant Ling Tian the position of duke and settle his matter of lifelong happiness. If not, it would truly be difficult to say what Ling Tian's exact status was. With the marriage settled, everyone naturally seemed closer than before. Of course, it wasn't appropriate for them to have discussions about Zhao Yanzu's marriage at the moment. While everyone knew that she was Ling Tian's woman, they had not announced the matter to the world, but Zhao Yanzu was already staying at the Ling family. Running over to the man's house before the marriage was even settled was a broken bar. Everyone was intentionally avoiding the topic, but Zhao Yanzu's mother was looking at Ling Tian like a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. According to Ling Tian's intentions, he definitely wouldn't return to Skybearing so soon. However, he had no choice but to do so at this moment. After resting for a few days in the Zhao family, Ling Tian received a note from Meng Legion. Ling Tian could not help but sigh with depression. It wasn't a big issue, but Ling Tian's father, Ling Zhao, had ignored all of his responsibilities and refused to do a thing. With the recent founding of the Divine Prefecture Empire, there were many things to be taken care of. Regardless of whether it was the military, politics or agriculture, there were far too many things for the new emperor to decide. However, Emperor Ling Zhao was scared silly by all of these troublesome decisions. Originally, Ling Zhao couldn't be bothered with reading any memorandums and he threw his jade seal over to Meng Liege and got Meng Liege to decide everything on his own. As for the matters which Meng Liege couldn't or didn't dare to decide, all of those matters would be put off to a later date when Ling Tian returns. During this period of time, the number of memorandums that were put off to a later date was sufficient to form a small mountain. With such an emperor on the throne, even if he was a talented individual who could bring stability to the lands, he was completely helpless. While there were many things that needed to be resolved urgently, there were far too many things which he didn't have the authority to decide. Recently, Ling Zhao had been pressed by Meng Liege and all the officials of the court day after day and hounded for deadlines all the time. In a fit of rage, he let out a roar of anger in the palace. "This daddy here just doesn't want to do it. That little B Street Road can do as he wishes." He then moved back to the Ling residence and shut himself in. They weren't able to solve a single problem but forced the emperor into hiding instead. All the officials of the court looked at each other, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. As Ling Tian held on to the message sent by the messenger Falcon, he wanted to laugh but couldn't laugh. He wanted to cry but had no tears. he could only let out a bitter laugh. The second morning he said his goodbyes to Zhao Fenghan and left the southeast. He sped his way back to Skybearing without resting. Zhao Fenghan knew that the moment Ling Tian returned, he wouldn't be the crown prince any longer but would become the ruler of an empire. From today on, regardless of whether it was in name or in power, Ling Tian would be the single ruler of the Divine Prefecture Empire. Thus, Zhao Fenghan did not dare to delay and arranged for his Zhao family to pack their luggage and leave for Skybearing 3 days after Ling Tian's departure. As for the Zhao family's military and administrative affairs, he left it all to Zhao Fengying. They needed to wait for the arrival of Ling Tian's imperial edict before they can make a final decision. The situation did not allow any delay. When Ling Tian returned to Skybearing, Meng Lij and the others were already waiting outside the city gates. They were like a bunch of clamoring and wailing children, whining the moment they saw Ling Tian return. Ling Zhao had long prepared the imperial edict to pass the throne down to Ling Tian, and the various officials had pestered Ling Tian to quickly ascend to the throne. After that, all the rites were greatly simplified, which was also to Ling Tian's liking. When he finally arrived at the administrative hall, he took in a deep breath of cold air as he saw the large mountain of memorandums for him to approve. Wasn't this to a broken bar spectacular a sight? Turning around to see the look of grievance on Meng Lij's face, Ling Tian frowned and asked, "The retired emperor didn't even look at a single memorandum? He left everything for me?" Meng Lij had obviously lost a great deal of weight over the past few days and said with a bitter expression, "The Divine Prefecture Empire has been through 2 emperors. The imperial ancestor did not attend a single court session, and the retired emperor did not even show his fascia broken bar." He then let out a long sigh of frustration. Ling Tian looked at him with compassion. "It has been tough on you." Hearing those words, Meng Lij had almost burst out into tears with complicated feelings in his heart. Even with the many affairs of the Ling family courtyard, I would be able to manage them in an orderly fashion. However, this is an entire empire. In the Ling family courtyard, he only had to answer to Ling Tian. However, the Divine Prefecture Empire had far too many officials and generals for him to answer to a broken bar. After going through 2 emperors, if not for him looking forward to Ling Tian's return, Meng Lij would have probably resigned from his post by now. This truly wasn't the job for a human. Working for a single day would reduce his lifespan by a month. Ling Tian hurriedly gathered all of his women and split the memorandums into batches for them to aid him. Of course, Meng Lij wasn't spared either and also had a pile of memorandums in another room. Meng Lij wanted to cry but no tears could come out. He had been looking forward to Ling Tian's return for a long time. But after Ling Tian's return, his workload had not decreased in the slightest. After assigning all the jobs, Ling Tian enjoyed his tea with his legs crossed. His relaxed expression could be compared to both his grandfather and his father, a broken bar. Of course, these helpers couldn't be a match for Meng Lij. However, Ling Tian had followed Ling Tian for more than 10 years and naturally knew how to deal with these matters. Zhao Yanzu, Shui Qian, and Yu Bingyan were descendants of famous aristocratic families and were naturally not unfamiliar with such affairs. As for Li Zhu, there wasn't a need to say anything more. Coming from the present day and having the experience of 5,000 years of culture, her ability to make decisions was something that even Ling Tian wouldn't be a match for. Besides that, they did not have anything to be wary about like Meng Lij and dared to make decisions. Thus, things were settled extremely swiftly. Ling Tian held onto the jade seal in one hand and the teacup in his other hand. After the others read through the memorandums and penned their opinions, Ling Tian placed his seal on it without even bothering to take a look. After that, the eunuchs who were waiting by the side immediately went out to announce the decrees. During this period of time, Li Zhu had joked, "Your Majesty, do you remember that the imperial harem must not participate in politics?" Ling Tian chuckled and waved his hands. "All of you aren't considered part of the imperial harem yet, so it naturally doesn't count." Li Zhu rolled her eyes and muttered, "I have never seen an emperor like you before." Meng Lij hurriedly added on with satisfaction, "This is already considered very good. In comparison, a broken bar cough cough cough, a broken bar. At least we can have our morning court session now. I am already very satisfied." Chapter 697, Majestic Wedding. After a full 3 days, Ling Tian and the gang finally managed to settle all the remnant political affairs that were left behind by the previous 2 emperors. Following that, it was time for Ling Tian to be anxious. Anxious about what? Having a son. With a son, there would be hope for him to abandon his present bitter life. However, it wasn't that simple for him to have a son. First, he would have to prepare for marriage. As such, another wave of excitement was sent forth. This time, they would have to make ample preparations for the wedding. With Ling Tian's ascension to the throne being settled in a rush, they would definitely not rush through Ling Tian's wedding this time. The date of the wedding was set for half a year later on the 5th day of the 9th month. After setting the date, most of the ladies went back to their own houses. Since the Heavenly Wind continent was too far, Shui Qi'an decided to stay in the Shui family courtyard located in Skybearing. The Zhou family that just arrived at Skybearing fetched Yansu away, and the Ling family fetched 3 back at the same time: Ling Chen, Li Zhu, and Princess Zhao Yu. They prepared a dowry from their own house before sending it over to their own son a broken bar. As for Yu Bingyan, the extremely busy Yu Manlu sent Yu Mantian to fetch her back. At the same time, Ling Tian announced to the world that Ling Jian would be conferred with the title of Divine Sword Duke. At the same time, he appointed Zhao Yuhan to be married to Ling Jian, and the date of the wedding was to be set on the same day as Ling Tian's wedding. Because of this, the court argued for half a day, saying that it did not adhere to the proper rules. A few dozen important ministers had even knelt down and refused to get up, pleading to Ling Tian to retract his orders. Helpless, Ling Tian could only set Ling Jian's wedding to the 19th of the 9th month. The entire Divine Prefecture Empire broke out into a wave of celebration, with all the taxes in the empire being waived. The agriculture department expanded rapidly and prosperity could be seen in a short few months. After the army of the Divine Prefecture Empire reorganized themselves, they began marching towards the northwest endlessly. The battle to determine the ruler of the continent would be determined in the northwest. The Ling and Yu family, which were about to be joined in marriage, will break out in battle eventually. The entire world was looking forward to it. After this battle, regardless of who the victor was, the entire world would welcome a period of peace. If the Divine Prefecture Empire of the Ling family achieves victory, this peace may last for a couple of decades or even centuries. Or broken bar. Half a year has passed by in a flash. The Yu family. Yu Mantang had returned victorious from his previous expedition to the Moon Deity Empire. The Moon Deity Empire without the Lei family guarding it was like a tiger without its teeth. It wasn't able to put up the slightest bit of resistance in the face of the ferocious attack of the Yu family, and there was no longer a Moon Deity Empire in the world. They were absorbed into the Divine Jade Empire, and the Moon Deity Empire had become a part of history. However, not a trace of joy could be seen on the face of Yu Mantang, who had returned with a victory. The officers who were familiar with him all knew that Yu Mantang's face had always been gloomy since the day he led his troops out from Bright Jade City. Even when he led the troops to victory and the entire army celebrated, the look on their marshal's face never changed. It was as though his heart was always burdened with a mountain of troubles which could not be solved. In truth, ever since Yu Mantang returned from Heavenly Wind, he had always been filled with troubles. Only when he returned to Bright Jade City, met his daughter again and find out about his daughter's wedding could a trace of a smile be seen on his gloomy face. After knowing about this, Yu Mantang immediately went to find Yu Manlu. Big brother, I don't wish for any accidents to happen during Bing Yan's wedding. After seeing Yu Manlu, this was the first sentence that he said. His expression was calm but his tone was resolute. This is the most important matter to Bing Yan and also something that she has dreamed of for a long time. I hope that she will be able to be married out happily without any accidents. Yu Manlu, who was busy in front of his desk, paused for a moment before lifting his head up with a cold gaze. Bing Yan is my beloved niece and her wedding would naturally be a joyous occasion. I also hope that there won't be any accidents during her wedding. I wonder what second brother means by your words? I hope to hear some clarification. Yu Mantang snorted coldly and looked outside the window. A short while later, he said slowly, The 4 elders of the star-picking tower are dead. I killed them." He then left the imperial study without saying another word or turning back. Yu Man Lu snorted coldly and his sharp gaze became sinister. With a crisp paw sound, the brush in his hand was shattered into pieces. The first elder appeared behind him without a sound. "Your Majesty." Yu Man Lu stood up and placed his hands behind his back. Without saying a word, Yu Man Lu's gaze swept past the first elder and he walked to the window. The 4 brothers were killed by second master, the first elder stammered. Furthermore, both second and third master led their men to the star-picking tower personally. "A broken bar, I'm afraid, a broken bar." Yu Man Lu looked out the window expressionlessly for a long while before letting out a long breath. "Forget it." Turning around, he said calmly, "Give my order to prepare for Princess Bright Jade's wedding. This is the first marriage of a princess from our empire and the dowry must be well prepared. Do not do anything else and no one is to interfere with this matter." "Yes." The first elder bowed before walking out. Yu Man Lu stood in front of the window without moving. His majestic figure suddenly seemed a little lonely and desolate at this moment. A gust of wind blew in from outside the window and a couple of yellow leaves drifted down from the tree and landed before Yu Man Lu. The wind blew into the room and a stack of paper on the table fluttered in the wind. A piece of paper drifted into the air and landed on the ground. On the paper, a couple of sentences were written. 200,000 soldiers were added to the Swallow County and they moved 30 miles up north. In front of the Morning Soul Mountain, 300,000 elites of the Ling family suddenly exited the valley. In the northeast direction, the Dongfang family sent 200,000 soldiers personally led by Dongfang Jinglei to the borders. In the south, Yu Qinglong's 300,000 men army had set up camp 15 miles northwest of the Swallow County. In the southeast, Zhao Fengyang personally led 600,000 soldiers and were marching their way to the Swallow County. Note: the mysterious first pavilion has finally surfaced and the first pavilion head is the number 1 subordinate under Ling Tian, Ling Tian. The first pavilion is definitely an organization that belonged to Ling Tian and Ling Tian was conferred the title of Divine Sword Duke. Above heavens in the southeast was ambushed by Ling Tian and was completely wiped out, including the sect master, Meng Fanyan. Not a single person managed to escape alive. According to rumors, justice from beyond heavens had taken action in this battle. A broken bar. News came one after another and every single piece of news was bad news. Just the number of soldiers camping along their borders numbered close to 2 million. This was Ling Tian giving him an obvious signal. After the wedding is completed, the gamble for the entire continent shall begin. 2 million soldiers, the assassins of the first pavilion, the Zhao family submitting. How fantastic, Ling Tian! In just a short few years, your strength has actually grown to such an extent. Yu Man Lu muttered, "Is it time for our 5 years agreement, the gamble for the world to begin?" Dark clouds could be seen all over Yu Man Lu's face and he turned around and seemed to be talking to the air. "Tighten our defensive circle and begin conscripting soldiers. All of our soldiers are to be sent towards Swallow County and we did not have to guard the other areas. If the enemy doesn't move, we shall not move." Ling Tian, I shall accompany you to write this crazy segment of history. Let us see who will be the last one laughing. It was finally the 9th month, the 5th day. In the largest plaza of Skybearing, the Emperor of the Divine Prefecture Empire was holding a never-seen-before majestic wedding. He was going to marry 6 wives together. According to the rites, with Ling Tian being Emperor and Ling Chen being the Empress, there wasn't a reason for them to hold their wedding together with others. However, Ling Tian insisted on doing so and it was a hint to his other women that he would treat all of his women fairly. Regardless of whether she was the Empress or consort, it was no more than a title. In his heart, all 6 of them had the same status. The north gate was open. The 9 celebratory cannons sounded. 3,000 of the Yu family's warriors were dressed in festive attire as they led an extremely luxurious carriage. 16 snow-white horses with a bright red cloth over them led the carriages and Yu Bingyan sat in the carriage arriving from the north. At the front of the troops, the scholarly Yu Man cupped his fists towards the surrounding crowd to display his thanks with his face beaming with joy. Beside him, the elegant third master Yu Man Tian, sat on a horse with his big belly protruding. The majestic-looking horse had been squashed by Yu Mantian's large body to the point it took every step with great difficulty. He was clad entirely in red robes, and it made Third Master Yu's black face stand out even more. With Yu Mantang and Yu Mantian personally escorting the troops, it was sufficient to show their Yu family's sincerity towards this marriage. Regardless of what happens between the two families in the future, they still seem to be extremely harmonious at the present moment. At the same time, via broken bar, the east gate was opened and the Zhao family's troops also streamed in. While the Zhao family was already a matter of the past, they were still a financial magnate, and the luxury of their troops was something that even the Yu family couldn't compare to. Outside the west gate, the Shui family, which was also a top-notch family, was dressed in festival attire as they escorted their little princess Shui Qian'er. The family head of the Shui family, Shui Mankang, as well as the other important figures of the family had appeared together. However, the place that was bustling with the most excitement was the center of Skybearing City. Colorful ribbons and decorations filled the entire Skybearing City. The doors to the Ling residence was open widely, and 3 exquisite sedans left the residence. In every single one of these sedans, a beautiful figure could be seen within them. An empress and 2 consorts had exited from the Ling residence. A wave of cheers could be heard. Ling Tian ran around with joy all over his face, and his usually cold appearance was no more. To him and his 50 brothers, today was truly a joyous occasion. Chapter 698, Difficult Choice. To Ling Tian and his brothers, the young noble who they had been loyally serving for the past decade was finally going to be married to their sister, Ling Tian. It was as though their biological sister was about to be married. Each one of them was full of excitement, and even those who had not fully recovered from their injuries joined the crowd in celebration. The imperial ancestor was personally hosting the wedding and had a big smile on his face. On top of the Ling residence pavilion, Ling Ran was dressed in ceremonial attire, and upon witnessing her daughter in her wedding dress, her heart was filled with complicated emotions as tears streamed down her cheeks. She truly did not wish to think back on past events. While her daughter's wish was finally fulfilled, thinking about her crazy husband, she did not know what to feel. As old Madame Ling looked at her daughter standing in a daze, she let out a soft sigh and said, "The past is over, and there isn't a point to think too much about it. From today onward, Zhao, you can be considered a part of our Ling family, and we definitely won't mistreat her. You should be happy for her as a mother." "Why are you crying instead?" Ling Ran nodded her head silently and dove into old Madame Ling's embrace with tears all over her face. Following the loud roar of a prosperity, the wedding was at its final stages. After paying respects to the heavens, earth, and ancestors, the imperial decree was read. Ling Chen was officially crowned empress and moved into the Eastern Palace. The other 5 were all conferred upon the title of imperial escorts and were assigned into their own palaces. After the majestic ceremony, it was naturally time for a banquet. The happiest person was Yu Mantian. As Third Master Yu witnessed his niece happily being married into the Ling family, he immediately had a sense of satisfaction and felt as though he truly had the talent to be a matchmaker. This was the only time in his life when he had been a matchmaker and both parties were joined together in a successful union. As such, he lifted his wine glass up in joyous celebration. Seeing Ling Tian running around busily, Yu Mantian grabbed him and growled to vent his new and old hatred. "Damn it, you little brat dared to hit me the other day?" Ling Tian was stumped. He originally thought that Yu Mantian caught him for a drink, but never expected that Yu Mantian wanted to settle scores with him instead. "Talk less rubbish. For the number of times that you hit me back then, you have to drink that many glasses of wine." Yu Mantian's face turned black. "Hurry up and stop delaying. Can you do it or not? Give me an answer." "Can. Of course I can," Ling Tian answered without any hesitation as he recalled how many glasses of wine he should drink. "At the very most, I only kicked him to the ground once and sealed his acupoints. 2 glasses should be sufficient and I can be on my way after that." As such, Ling Tian poured himself 2 glasses and downed it quickly. Finished drinking? Yu Tian asked, and Ling Tian nodded his head in response. Yu Tian then chuckled, and his malevolent teeth could be seen breaking out into a wide smile. Let this daddy here return you a few hits after you finish drinking. Don't worry. This daddy here won't go too far. Ling Tian was speechless. He truly hasn't seen someone so shameless before. Yu Mantang held onto his wine glass and walked over with a smile on his face. This must be the world-famous First Pavilion head, right? I have long heard of your fame, and it is truly better to see you in person than hear about you from rumors. He then reprimanded Yu Tian. Are you not going to move to the side? This is your niece's wedding. What do you want to do? Start a fight in this place? Yu Tian glared at Yu Mantang for a long while, but chose to remain silent as he moved to the side. He then said to Ling Tian, "Little brat, it is this daddy niece's wedding today, and I shall let you off first. I will find a time to settle scores with you someday." First Pavilion head, he. What amazing fame. This daddy isn't convinced. He then left. Yu Mantang dragged Ling Tian with a bright smile on his face as he lifted his glass to give Ling Tian a toast. He then suddenly whispered to Ling Tian, "Tell Ling Tian that I want to meet him." Ling Tian's eyes gleamed for a moment before lifting up his glass. "I thank Second Master for your kindness. We are all a big family and there isn't a need to stand on ceremony." Yu Mantang laughed in response. The smell of wine permeated the hall and chattering filled the place. "There isn't anything else. I only want to ask, is Shui Wubo's death because of my big brother's martial arts? You are the only one who can tell me the truth." The broken bar. Yu Mantang's expression was heavy as he asked Ling Tian with his eyes gleaming. It was as though there wasn't anything more important than this matter to him in his heart. Ling Tian looked at Yu Mantang and felt that the reaction of his father-in-law was a little exaggerative, and he was no longer his wise and resolute self. Everyone probably has an answer in their hearts already. What is the point of asking such a question now? Why do you have to ask an outsider like me if your big brother is using a venomous martial art? Besides, this isn't the most appropriate occasion to ask about this matter either. Today is the day of my marriage and I have a few brides waiting for me. Even if you are my father-in-law, you can't be acting in such a manner, right? While he had the heart to ignore Yu Mantang, he just could not bring himself to do it. Yu Mantang wasn't only his father-in-law, he even owed Yu Mantang a favor from before. Regardless of how dissatisfied he was, he couldn't possibly voice his dissatisfaction. After Shui Wubo suffered from Yu Manlu's palm strike, his heart burst apart. In the beginning, nothing seemed to be wrong with his body, but his entire body dissolved into black water after an hour. The toxicity of the black water withered the surroundings with the ground cracking up. There is still a sense of lingering fear upon thinking back about that event, Ling Tian said patiently. Shui Wubo did not have any other injuries, and this is something that both Justice and I can be a witness to. Shui Wubo's cause of death is definitely Yu Manlu's venomous martial art. Indeed so. Broken bar. Yu Mantang's face turned pale as though he lost his spirit. He then suddenly burst out laughing strangely with tears in his eyes. Shaking his head, he said, "The return of the corrosive art, the destruction of white jade. The return of the corrosive art, the destruction of white jade." Haha, a broken bar. This is indeed so. The Yu family has truly fallen to such a state. Haha, a broken bar. Our dear ancestors, the Yu family is about to be defeated. The 1,000 years of our Yu family's glory is about to be defeated. What should I do? What should I do? Ling Tian turned around and looked at Yu Mantang with doubt. Yu Mantang let out a miserable laugh as his body stumbled pathetically. A few centuries ago, the entire pugilistic world was gathered to surround a demon. Finally, the martial order medallion owner of that generation personally sent that demon into a valley 10,000 feet deep. Before the death of that demon, my Yu family ancestor found the hiding place of that demon and retrieved the cultivation method of that demon. Because of a moment of greed and selfishness, my ancestor hid the cultivation method in our Yu family. After finding out that the cultivation of that demonic martial art went against the heavens, my ancestors wanted to destroy it on many occasions but couldn't bear to do so. Finally, It was sealed in the topmost pavilion, and all Yu family members were forbidden from cultivating that demonic martial art. A couple of generations later, this matter was slowly forgotten and the demonic martial art also went missing. Finally, there was an ancestor of our Yu family who was crippled and couldn't cultivate. However, he was well versed in fortune telling and divination. When he was 100 years old, he helped our Yu family to make a final divination before dying from shock. Yu Mantang looked at Ling Tian and said slowly, "The divination left behind from our ancestors can be split into two parts. The first was the return of the corrosive art, the destruction of white jade. In other words, the reappearance of the demonic martial art would spell the doom of our Yu family." "What about the other part?" Ling Tian asked with curiosity. "The other was a broken bar." Yu Mantang laughed bitterly and said, "Fighting with men would lead to 1,000 years of prosperity. Fighting with the heavens would lead to destruction in a single night." Ling Tian's heart shook and he replied with an "Oh, we have always thought that our Yu family would never overestimate our abilities and be arrogant to the point that we would fight against the heavens. Furthermore, even if we wanted to go against the heavens, we wouldn't know how to." Yu Mantang let out a self-mocking laugh. "Only today do I finally understand that the heavens wasn't the heavens. Fighting with the heavens would lead to destruction in a single night." "This heavens are broken bar." Yu Mantang looked at Ling Tian and a desolate smile could be seen on his face. "This heavens actually referred to you. The Tian in your name which refers to the heavens. The monarch is Ling Tian. With you fighting Tian, how can we survive?" Ling Tian let out a dry laugh and felt his back turning cold. "Forget it. Regardless of reason, it is an undeniable truth that my big brother has chosen to cultivate that vile demonic martial art that cannot be accepted in the world. It seems like the fortune of our Yu family has reached its end and there is no turning back." "This is probably so, haha." A broken bar. Yu Mantang then stood up and walked towards the outside. "Father-in-law," Ling Tian cried out to stop Yu Mantang. "Since Yu Manlu has chosen to go against the heavens and incite the anger of men and the heavens, with the present state of the world being extremely clear, I wonder which side father-in-law will be standing on?" Yu Mantang's body froze in front of the entrance and the past few decades from his youth till now flashed past his eyes. He thought about how his brother took care of him when he was young and how the three of them brothers were as close as one. All of the past events had slowly surfaced in his mind. While Yu Mantang's body did not even move an inch at that moment, Ling Tian who was behind him could clearly feel as though Yu Mantang seemed to have aged a couple of decades in that instant. After returning, I will persuade Big Brother again. He is my big brother after all. Yu Mantang did not turn around again but replied with a soft voice, "Regardless of the outcome, I am a member of the Yu family after all, a broken bar of the matters in the world. What is right is right, what is wrong is wrong. Everyone will be able to see through right and wrong clearly. Even if one is confused for a moment, there will be a time when the truth comes out. I have never been a fool and can naturally see through things clearly. However, I have to do some things even if I know that it is wrong." Chapter 699, Wedding Night. Yu Mantang's face was solemn. "I am still a man after all and not a piece of rock. Even if I know that what I am doing isn't right, I am unable to throw away the decades of brotherly ties I had. While it isn't a righteous decision, my feelings compel me to do so. I will not let Big Brother face your millions of soldiers and numerous experts alone. Because he is my big brother forever. Because I will always be a member of the Yu family. Perhaps you may think that I am foolish or unable to see through right from wrong. However, now that Bing Yan has someone to spend the rest of her life with, I do not have any more burdens in my heart. Thus, even if this decision of mine is wrong and it would be against my conscience, I can make this decision without any hesitation. With Bing Yan in your hands, everything that my brother wanted her to do is in the past. Regardless of how my big brother erred, perhaps he made the wrong choice or had the wrong thoughts, in my heart, He is doing everything for the Yu family. This is something that I have no doubts about. Yu Mantang chuckled and he turned around with his eyes glowing. The gentleman is Ling Tian, my good son-in-law. Please take good care of my daughter. Give her happiness. When these few words sounded, Yu Mantang's figure had already disappeared from Ling Tian's sight. Ling Tian took 2 steps back and sat back on his chair with Yu Mantang's words echoing in his ears. Figures flashed and Ling Jian and Ling Kai appeared by the door with a look of deep thought on their faces. Obviously, they had both heard what Yu Mantang said. Does young noble think that second master Yu's words are difficult to understand? Ling Kai asked. Ling Jian shook his head bitterly without saying a thing. He was naturally able to understand what Yu Mantang was saying, but despite that, he still felt as though his entire head was in a complete mess. Ling Jian smiled and said, in truth, Second Master Yu's words are easy to understand. Second Master Yu's actions are one of a sentimental individual. Just like how us brothers will always follow young noble. Regardless of what young noble does, we will always support you. Even if your actions go against the heavens, cause the destruction of nations, go against the entire world, or even incite the rage of the heavens and earth. We all have a moral compass in our hearts and can tell right from wrong. However, as long as young noble makes the decision, regardless of the mistake, we will follow young noble to the very end. If young noble chooses to be a benevolent individual, we will be a living Buddha. If young noble chooses to be a vile individual, we will be your slaughter blade. This has nothing to do with right and wrong. The key is young noble's choice. All of us are living for young noble and everything we do in this world will be for young noble. Thus, it is impossible to talk about good and evil, if there isn't young noble in this world. So what if we become living deities or unparalleled heroes in the world? I believe this is how Second Master Yu feels about Yu Man Lu as well. Ling Jian chuckled. The feelings of us brothers towards young noble will only exceed that of Yu Mantang's feelings towards Yu Man Lu. Ling Kai nodded his head in agreement. What Brother Jian said is also what I wanted to say. Ling Jian's mind cleared up immediately as though he was enlightened. That's right. This is indeed the case. Foolish loyalty. It can be said that this is the manifestation of an individual's charisma. Everyone understood what was justice and righteousness. The line between good and evil was also something that everyone was clear on. It is also because of such stubbornness that the human world was filled with so much excitement. It is also because of this that there would be countless heroic legends. A warrior will die for one who understands him. This was probably the case. The one who understands him may not be a benevolent or righteous individual. However, there may still be many who will be willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Just like in the history books, when General Yuf of the Southern Song dynasty died, there were many generals under his charge who committed suicide upon hearing the news. This was probably the reason, who didn't understand the importance of life, who wouldn't be able to tell right from wrong. It was a road of no turning back the moment they stepped on it. However, they still chose to do so. They were foolishly respected, foolishly cute, and their foolishness could be praised. Slapping Ling Jian and Ling Kai on the shoulders, Ling Tian walked out without saying a word. His originally heavy footsteps also became strangely light at this instant. After the solemn conversation with his father-in-law, Ling Tian had almost forgotten that today was the day of his wedding. He still had 6 beauties waiting for him. While the banquet in the palace had already been finished, the entire palace was still bustling with excitement. As Ling Tian walked into the palace, many eunuchs and maids would greet him along the way. The Eastern Palace was up ahead and it was the palace of the Empress, the place where Ling Chen was staying. After asking, Ling Tian was shocked to realize that the palaces of the ladies were in all 4 directions. Upon hearing that, Ling Tian could not help but feel a tinge of rage. Why do they have to be so far apart? Could it be that I have to run all the way from the east to the west in the middle of the night? This is too much. How can a single person be able to satisfy this emperor? Ling Tian thought as he walked and his footsteps suddenly paused. Find someone to expand my bedroom tomorrow. Let the head butler find me with his proposal. A eunuch by his side hurriedly knelt down and accepted the decree. Ling Tian immediately felt a wave of depression. It truly wasn't easy to be an emperor. Wherever he walked, he would be accompanied by a bunch of kowtowing bugs. It was truly too annoying. No wonder his grandfather and father hated the idea of being emperor. They were truly the most intelligent ones. It seems like I must hurry up and make a little Ling Tian so that I can get rid of all these stern rules. After finally making his way to Ling Tian's eastern palace, Ling Tian welcomed him in with her face completely reddened. After a short 2 sentences, she then resolutely chased him out of her palace. As the empress, she could not possibly have Ling Tian to herself on their wedding day. After all, Ling Tian still had to pay a visit to her other sisters and do what he had to. Ling Tian rubbed his nose and could only back out of the palace helplessly. With Ling Tian sending him out with a bright smile on her face, Ling Tian had no choice but to change his route. As the slightly depressed Ling Tian thought about Li Zu's proud and cold beauty, he felt his heart ablaze. It doesn't seem like a bad idea to subdue this demoness first as well. Since you always like to tease this young noble shall show you what it means to roam unhindered with a single spear. As he fantasized what was about to come, Ling Tian could not help but let out 2 strange chuckles. Imagining the look of Li Zu pleading under him, Ling Tian could not help but grow eager. When he arrived at the door of the imperial consort, Ling Tian was thoroughly stunned. He was actually greeted with a shut door. The monarch of an empire was greeted with a shut door. The 2 palace maids were trembling as they knelt on the ground, reporting to Ling Tian that the imperial consort was tired and had fallen asleep. Ling Tian became incensed. Isn't this the palace? I am the current emperor and the ruler of this land. Is there still a place that I cannot go to in the palace? How ridiculous! Ling Tian raised up the hem of his robes and was about to barge in. The 2 palace maids hurriedly kowtowed profusely in fear but actually refused to move out of the way. At the same time, they cried out to Ling Tian to give the decree to execute them if he really wanted to meet the imperial consort. Upon asking, Ling Tian realized that the imperial consort had given a strict order for them to just commit suicide if they allowed the emperor to enter a broken bar. Ling Tian halted his footsteps angrily as he puffed angrily. He couldn't possibly execute 2 palace maids just because of such a small matter after all. Letting out a snort, he turned around to walk towards Yu Bingyan's palace. Yu Bingyan has always been a gentle lady and she should not reject me outside of the door, right? Yu Bingyan lived up to Ling Tian's expectations indeed and did not reject Ling Tian outside of the door. After welcoming him warmly into the palace, she then told Ling Tian with a strangely resolute tone, "There are still many younger sisters who are waiting for your majesty tonight." In any case, she was implying that Ling Tian couldn't spend the night there. Before Ling Tian could even warm his seat and finish a cup of tea, he was sent out by Yu Bingyan respectfully. Ling Tian was furious. With Ling Tian's unparalleled movement techniques, he was naturally able to endure the running around. However, the pitiful ones were the eunuchs following behind Ling Tian. They had run around to the point their legs were almost broken and were all panting heavily. After all, not everyone was a peerless expert. After a short while, Ling Tian arrived at Zhao Yanzu's place. Zhao Yanzu naturally welcomed him respectfully but had also resolutely and politely invited Ling Tian to the palace of her other sisters. Ling Tian let out a long sigh. However, he refused to give up and went to find Shuiqi Honor. In the end, his treatment and the reason she gave was the semi-broken bar. Finally, even Ling Tian began to feel tired with his unparalleled movement techniques. He barged into Princess Zhao Yu's room and refused to leave. But in the end, Ling Tian was still chased out with a helpless look on his face. It was for no other reason but because Princess Zhao Yu had taken out the biggest weapon a woman could have, tears. This weapon was one that Ling Tian was most afraid of. Seeing the tears of his cousin flow down from her cheeks, all of Ling Tian's fantasies were immediately thrown out his mind. Even his energetic little Ling Tian had lost all of its energy and Ling Tian could only walk away in defeat. Dejected and depressed, Ling Tian took a stroll in the imperial garden as he let out a long sigh. Turning around and looking at the eunuch Zhao who was panting to the point his tongue was sticking out, Ling Tian asked, "Zhao, Have you ever seen an emperor with such bad luck? I married 6 beauties in a single day but cannot find a place to sleep on my wedding night. Zhao Dezi panted heavily with sweat all over his face and he did not dare to say a single word. At the same time, he truly did not have the strength to say anything either. In this short span of time, they had run around the entire palace and with even Ling Tian feeling tired, Zhao Dezi, who did not have any martial arts, was nationally exhausted. Feeling bored, Ling Tian sat down on a stone table under a tree and said, "Go back and rest, don't bother about me." He then chased all of the eunuchs by his side away and sat down with a sigh. Having no place to sleep on his wedding night, this was truly a queer sight. Was this the logic of a single monk will scoop water from the well but many monks has no water to drink? If all of you push the study to the limits, I shall go and find a prostitute, Ling Tian thought hatefully. Just when he was in thought, he suddenly felt a strange fluctuation in the air which indicated the appearance of experts in the palace.